Chapter 1291. Enough. They're just a group of low-level civilians outside the ruling system. How could they know such a secret? Just as the female Dalent began to violently invade the mental world of the captives and forcibly read their memories, the boy finally spoke up to stop her from going any further. Because it was meaningless. If the 13 puppets were released, and they really did reach some kind of agreement in secret, it would be impossible for these people to know. Sir Commander, I think this matter is very serious. We must first investigate clearly before taking the next step. The female Dalent threw the captives aside with a solemn expression on her face. The boy nodded thoughtfully. What you said makes sense. We need to first figure out how the enemy caused a complete expeditionary army to suddenly collapse overnight. By the way, have the emotions of the survivors stabilized? Didn't they provide any useful information? I'm sorry. They don't know what happened at all. They only know that the fortress they were guarding was suddenly surrounded by thousands of enemies, followed by the gate being breached. The only thing they could do was to continuously flee to places where there were no traces of people. The female subordinate explained quickly. In fact, the entire expeditionary army was currently in a state of confusion. Most people could not even understand why the expeditionary army was directly uprooted. After all, the expeditionary army of the Durantians was not a backward army that relied on primitive means to transmit information and orders. Almost every 50 people would have a spellcaster who was responsible for relaying orders from their superiors, as well as transmitting the information they had gathered back to their superiors. In terms of information transmission, they were far more efficient than some technologically advanced civilizations. In theory, unless a large number of troops were quietly gathered and launched a full-scale attack on the garrison of more than 100,000 people, especially if the magic barrier was broken at the first moment, the news would definitely be transmitted. In the end, every member of the expeditionary army would know what they had encountered. But now, the interesting thing was that this news was obviously not transmitted. It was cut off at some point. Thinking of this, the boy touched his chin with one hand and gently tapped the armrest of his chair with the other. After about 2 to 3 minutes, he smiled and said, "In that case, why don't we hide first and use the identities of these captives to explore their world? If I remember correctly, the army should have a group of shapeshifters on standby." Shapeshifters? The female Dalent's expression changed slightly. The shapeshifters in the expeditionary army were not magical forces, nor were they members of the Dalent. They were a special race that had been absorbed into the system. They were the few indigenous people left on planet Mocha and had an incredible shape-shifting ability. As long as they met certain preconditions, they could not only transform into the appearance of any creature, but they could even copy the spirit, thoughts, and soul of the other party, without the slightest flaw. In short, it was a perfect disguise. Even the person closest to him would be able to tell. That's right, shapeshifters. I was curious as to how the world had changed in the years since the teleportation was interrupted, especially the 13 traders. Why were they willing to take such a huge risk? You have to understand that unforeseen events don't happen casually. There are often hidden motives behind them. When he said the boy of the Dalent, understood, I'll immediately summon the leader of the shapeshifters. The female Dalent bowed, then turned and walked out. Although she forced herself to remain calm, her 2 slightly trembling legs betrayed her true feelings in her heart. Anyone who understood these shapeshifters would not like them. Every time they thought of them, boundless fear would emerge in their hearts. Watching the back of his subordinate gradually disappear into the distance, the boy finally stood up slowly from the chair and walked up to a young man who looked to be 18 or 19 years old with short blonde hair. He pressed his right index finger on the young man's forehead and recited in a low voice, "Your eyes are my eyes, your ears are my ears, and your thoughts are my thoughts. In the name of the supremacy of magic, I declare that your soul and body will be under my control." The next second, the young man suddenly jumped up from the ground, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. After a while, when the trembling gradually calmed down, he finally opened his eyes. The corner of his mouth was slightly raised, and he muttered to himself in an extremely awkward tone. So simple. I thought that I would need to struggle a little to perfectly control this body. But who knew that he didn't even have the courage to resist? It saved me a lot of effort. As soon as he finished speaking, the boy, who was standing at the side, also opened his eyes and returned to the cold chair. He seemed to have sunk into deep thought. However, as long as one paid attention to the dull look in his eyes, it was not difficult to tell that his consciousness had left this body. The warrior, who stood at the side and watched the whole process from the beginning to the end, finally could not help but ask, "Sir Commander, are you thinking of, Yes. I need to go with the shapeshifters to take a look at their world." The boy, who had completely occupied the young man's body, grinned, his face full of excitement and anticipation. In his eyes, conquering this world was just a game, a test of the knowledge he had learned in the past 12 years and the magic power he had mastered. It was not important whether he won or not. What was important was the means, temperament, and potential he displayed in the process. Unfortunately, no one in the expeditionary army knew about this. About 15 minutes later, a group of strange humanoid creatures with extremely ugly appearances and pungent body odors were finally brought to the hall of the tower. After the order was given, they were like hungry animals, pouncing on the captives one by one, ignoring the screams and wails of these pitiful creatures. Little by little, they sucked the last bit of life force from the captives' bodies. After the targets were turned into shriveled corpses, the shapeshifters finally obtained all the conditions needed to transform. They transformed into the captives one by one, no matter whether it was their appearance, language, habits, or accent. They were no different from the dead ones. Looking at these terrifying monsters, the female Dalent lowered her voice and whispered into the boy's ear, "Sir, I suggest that you better be careful. Shapeshifters are a kind of life form that is easily driven by desire. They often can't resist the temptation and do something that crosses the line. Some even choose to directly sneak into the other's group and disappear." Chapter 1292. On the boundless green sea, a small wooden boat was quickly moving towards the coastline against the monsoon wind. Even though this ship was extremely small, and there were several large patches of different colors on its dirty canvas, any ship that brushed past it, no matter how large they were, or how deep they were, would immediately turn around and flee without any hesitation. It was as if the boat was the messenger of death, a symbol of disaster and misfortune. Of course, the truth was not far off, because this was not a normal boat, but a famous pirate ship on this route, a group of robbers known as the Vultures of the Sea. Their achievements were not only robbing merchant ships that did not have the ability to resist, as long as someone was willing to pay a high price. They even dared to rob warships. In short, this was a group of daring bastards that did all kinds of evil. Most importantly, after dozens of encirclements, they were still alive and well. They were not like some pirates that were sent to the bottom of the sea to be fed to the fish, nor were they hung on the gallows of a city's harbor. However, no one would ever know that these pirates, who seemed no different from before, were now a completely different group of people. A group of conquerors who were 10,000 times more dangerous than them, who could even push the entire world into the abyss of destruction. "How far are we from Archie's city?" a young man lying on the deck and sunbathing asked without turning his head. Without asking, it was obvious that he was the highest commander of the Dalent Expeditionary Force, the mysterious boy that had been raised for 12 years. "Sir, according to the memories of the owner of this body, we should be able to arrive before nightfall at the latest." The middle-aged man in charge of the rudder quickly bowed and replied respectfully, "How many times have I said it? Don't call me sir, and don't show a superior and subordinate relationship. Don't forget, we are now a group of pirates. Usually, pirates do not have a clear superior and subordinate relationship, at least in this world." The boy casually reminded. "Then what should I call you?" The middle-aged shapeshifter asked meaningfully. As a special race that wandered on the edge of the ruling system, he had always been very curious as to why the higher-ups would send a teenage boy to be the commander of the expeditionary force. Moreover, the boy was clearly not a Dalent, but his position was higher than 99% of the Dalen's people. Banco. My body's name is Banco. From now on, you can just call me by my name. Also, tell your subordinates to prepare. Once we get ashore, we must spread our name as fast as possible. It would be best to attract the attention of the higher-ups. I don't want to waste time between merchants and civilians. Then, the boy threw the fruit he just finished eating into the sea. On the surface, it looked like a wooden sailboat, but under the magical modifications, not only did it have many comfortable and convenient facilities, but also had a portal that connected to the magic fortress. And could not be, is, as. Remember, don't touch those who have nothing to do with the mission. I need to infiltrate their inner circle and find out the truth of what happened 12 years ago, not create panic and chaos. The boy raised his head and stared into the other's eyes. His tone was full of warning. The shapeshifter nodded without hesitation. Of course. You are the highest commander. I will obey your orders. Tell everyone to exercise restraint. The boy raised a finger and shook it. No, not restraint. Absolute obedience. If any of you try to escape from my control or do something in the dark, I will mercilessly wipe you and your clansmen out. Believe me, I have this ability. Even if I don't have it now, I will have it in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, before the shapeshifter had time to react, a burst of shouts came from the watchtower. It's the port. There's a port in front. If I'm not mistaken, it should be our destination, Archie City. Accompanied by the sound of wind and shouting, a huge statue slowly rose from the sea. It was a huge white statue of a human. It was at least 50 meters tall. One of its hands was holding a long spear, while the other hand was holding a shield. There was also a gorgeous helmet on its head. Through the long-distance observation magic, they could clearly see that the patterns on the feathers were very lifelike. At the tip of the long spear, there was an orange-red flame burning brightly. It was a reference for the ships coming in and out. Needless to say, it wasn't just a simple statue. At the same time, it also functioned as a lighthouse. After a while, when the statue was completely revealed, the people on the ship could finally see the bustling port of Archie, as well as the layers of the city that continued to rise. We're finally here. Was a city built on a hillside? There doesn't seem to be any energy waves that are worth being wary of. The boy muttered to himself as he signaled the shapeshifter to steer the ship closer to the berth. Under the guidance of the dock staff, it didn't take long for the group to set foot on solid land. Please open the hatch. We need to check the cargo. Then we'll take a tax of 5% to 10%, depending on the type of cargo. An official came to the side of the ship under the protection of the guards and pointed at the closed hatch. Open it. The boy waved his hand and signaled the shapeshifters to do so. After all, he wasn't doing this to make money. He just wanted to create a commotion so that he could get in touch with the higher-ups. Therefore, from the beginning, tax evasion and bribing the officials weren't an option. With a bang, the gorgeous colors instantly attracted the attention of all the people around the dock. Gems. Multicolored gems. Each piece was at least the size of a baby's fist. The entire cabin was filled with them. Oh my God. You guys are. The official had clearly never seen such a spectacular scene. He was speechless. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 1293. As you can see, in the process of hunting down the Dalent, we unintentionally discovered a huge treasure trove. It said that they had secretly hoarded it before they were destroyed and were preparing to transport it away. And these gems are only a small part of the treasure trove. The boy observed the reactions of the people around him while pretending to be proud of himself as he introduced the origin of these gems. As a child who had received a strict elite education since the age of 3, he knew very well how to attract the attention of those at the top of the ruling system. The answer was very simple. It was profit, unimaginably huge profit. High-quality gems were the basic materials needed to make powerful magical items. At the same time, they were also a symbol of wealth for ordinary people. This was especially so in this world where precious metals were still used as currency. The value of gems was far above that of gold. One could only imagine how many people would go crazy and how many would lose their lives when the legend of a huge treasure trove spread. More importantly, if this treasure trove was really left behind by the Dalent Expeditionary Army, then wouldn't there be something left behind by them? After all, 12 years was not a long time. The intelligent beings of this world would not forget the strength of the invaders and the humiliation they had experienced. Even if they had defeated the enemy and chased the remnants into remote mountains, isolated islands, and deserts, they would still be full of desire for the magical knowledge and technology mastered by the Dalent people. Some places even offered huge rewards. As long as one could find the buildings, weapons, armor, magical items, books, notes, and scrolls left behind by the Dalent people, not only could they obtain unimaginable wealth, but they could also change their social class and social status, leaping from a commoner to a high and mighty noble. Through the information read from the memories of the captives, the boy already knew that the 13 so-called kings did not relax after successfully destroying the expeditionary army and enjoying the power and authority in their hands. On the contrary, as the former traders of this world, they knew very well how powerful the Dalent civilization was and that they could make a comeback at any time. Therefore, for the past 12 years, everyone had been desperately searching for the things left behind by the expeditionary army, whether it was knowledge, wealth, or weapons and equipment, in order to prepare for the next war. It was obvious that the enemy the boy was about to face was not a group of fools who could not fight back, but a group of sinister and vicious smart people who knew how to absorb nutrients from their opponents to strengthen themselves. Most importantly, these fellows didn't show any mercy even when they were dealing with their own kind. In the process of cooperation, they had directly or indirectly destroyed countries and killed no less than the expeditionary army. An entire ship of gems docked at the dock caused a huge commotion in Archie's city-state. Whether it was the people at the bottom who were watching the show or those who had some ideas about the treasure, they all looked at this group of pirates and mercenaries who seemed to have obtained the ticket to the upper class. At night, in the magnificent palace, a grand banquet was in progress. As the host of the banquet and the owner of the city, Governor Parasa raised a crystal cup filled with pale green liquid and shouted in an impassioned tone, "Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, first, please allow me to introduce these brave warriors who came from afar. It is them who brought the priceless gems from the other side of the ocean, as well as the treasure left behind by the evil invaders." As soon as he finished speaking, every man and woman in luxurious clothing raised their wine glasses at the same time and used their other hand to knock on the crystal with a silver spoon, making a crisp sound. It was obvious that this was their way of expressing their welcome. When the knocking sound gradually subsided, a shapeshifter stepped forward and bowed. "Thank you very much. No need to be polite. This is what you deserve. In addition, I believe that everyone here is very eager to hear about your adventures. Isn't that right?" Governor Parasa glanced at the people who didn't hide their greed and desire from the corner of his eyes. If it wasn't for the king's order, he wouldn't have allowed such important information to leak out. He would have immediately sealed the information and sent a fleet to take the treasure for himself. But unfortunately, this goal was impossible to achieve now. Under the absolute order established by the 13 kings, no one could go against their will, not even the governor who also wielded powerful magical powers and an army. Just as the saying went, the warrior who killed the evil dragon would also become the evil dragon in the end. In the process of cooperating with the Dalent Expeditionary Army, the 13 traders had learned too much knowledge, experience, and wisdom, including the cruel methods of ruling and suppressing resistance. After they destroyed the Expeditionary Army, not only did they not restore the world to its original state, but they also seized the opportunity to usurp all the power and made themselves a god that was above all other life. Parasa had personally seen the king he was loyal to, so he understood that there was an insurmountable gap between him and the other party. Naturally, he wouldn't be foolish enough to play any tricks in private. He only had one thing to do, and that was to obey orders and spread the news first, allowing those with sufficient ability and wealth to investigate whether the treasure was real. If it was real, then would it be as large as the rumors said? Would it contain the knowledge and technology left behind by the Dalen's people? Today's banquet was actually an exhibition. It allowed the powerful organizations in Archie to see the mountains of gems and the pirates and mercenaries that became rich overnight. Soon, under the governor's deliberate promotion, the luxurious banquet quickly entered its climax. When the guests saw the small mountain of gemstones piled up in the middle of the hall, they all revealed expressions of shock and desire. There were also some who did not hide it and began to make contact with the shapeshifters, trying to get useful information from them. As the youngest person in the group, he was also the most susceptible to temptation. The boy was already surrounded by women of all ages. They all had one thing in common, and that was their body was brimming with beauty and temptation. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1294. Bonko, can I call you that? A young lady in an off-the-shoulder dress leaned forward, showing off her figure that she was proud of. Of course, Miss Glinda. The boy who was playing the role of a young man smiled and nodded. If it wasn't for the fact that he had already read her mind with the help of magic, he would have mistakenly believed that this noble lady had developed a sexual interest in him just by looking at the worshipful expression on her face. Of course, from a certain perspective, she was indeed interested in him. However, this interest was completely different from the sexual interest she displayed. To be exact, the charming madams and young ladies sitting around him all had the same goal in mind. Some of them were inspired by their husbands or fathers, while others were to satisfy their own ambitions and desires. In short, they wanted to get as much information as they could from this young man, especially the location of the treasure and the dangers that they had to pay attention to along the way. The young lady who was called Miss Glinda didn't realize how dangerous she was dealing with someone. She maintained her sweet smile and said, I have to admit, your adventure story is too exciting. I can't believe that you were so brave when facing the evil Dalet. However, I have a small question. Oh, what question? The boy pretended to be obsessed. Why didn't you choose to hide the treasure secretly after you found it? Why did you choose to only bring back a small part of it and announce the location of the treasure to the public? Glinda carefully probed. Not only her, but all the ladies in the surroundings pricked up their ears to listen to this person's explanation. No matter what, giving up such a huge treasure for no reason was always a surreal feeling. It also didn't fit the greedy and selfish nature of most intelligent beings. Therefore, when someone was willing to share the treasure, the first thing a smart person would think of was not how to maximize the benefits. Instead, they would suspect that it was a scam or that there was a terrifying trap behind it. Good question. Actually, it's not that we didn't think of taking the treasure for ourselves, but it's a pity that it's too big. It's so big that it's beyond our ability. Think about it. Just a portion of the gems in the treasury has already caused such a huge commotion. There are even many people who want to take risks and set their eyes on us. If more treasures appear out of thin air, do you think we can hold on to them? The answer was obvious. We couldn't defend it, let alone protect our own lives and property. Therefore, instead of holding on to a huge treasure and attracting disaster, it was better to do what he was doing now. He would first obtain a portion of the treasure and then announce the rest of the treasure to the public, using real news to distract them. This way, the truly powerful forces won't keep their eyes on us and will choose to fight for the remaining parts. What's more, do you think the treasure is stored in a safe warehouse? No, it was placed in a place filled with magical traps and monster guards. We are neither prepared nor capable of dealing with these things. Instead of losing his life for wealth, he might as well stop before going too far and turn the gemstones in his hands into wealth and fame. With these two things, we can change our social class and even obtain a piece of land to become a noble lord. When he said this, the eyes of the body controlled by the boy flashed with a vision of the future, as well as the wild ambition unique to young people. I see. The girl's face showed a thoughtful expression. As a member of the local upper class, she could understand the idea of exchanging information and wealth for power and status. In the 12 years since the invaders were defeated, There were too many people who used this method to climb to a higher position. For some reason, the 13 kings who ruled the world were always generous with their rewards for those who dare to take risks. Sometimes, an important discovery could directly allow a lowly slave to rise above the head of his original master. Under the absolute control of the kings, any unlucky person who tried to resist or refused to admit the truth would be cruelly and mercilessly slaughtered. Seeing that most of the noble women and young ladies had already believed him, the boy immediately took out a crumpled parchment and said meaningfully, "I have here a detailed record of the entrance to the treasure, as well as the areas that our team has explored so far. I wonder if anyone is willing to follow me into an empty room to have an in-depth discussion." Instantly, the expressions of all the noble ladies and young ladies changed drastically. This was especially true for the noble ladies who had not yet married. They were either scared to the point that their faces turned pale, or they were angry and shy. This was because they knew that the so-called in-depth discussion was actually a dirty deal in private. Only those who were willing to pay the price could bring back the map and information. In contrast, the noble ladies were slightly better, but because the boy was playing the role of a pirate and mercenary at the bottom of society, the noble ladies, who had always been arrogant, fell into a dilemma. After all, no one knew if their husbands would understand and forgive them or fly into a rage after receiving the news. One had to know that seducing and using were one thing, and being succeeded in was another. The former was just a despicable method, while the latter could be called betrayal. Just when everyone was in a dilemma, a glamorous woman in her 30s finally stood up. She took the boy's arm and responded with a smile. "What are you waiting for? Let's go. Let's go to the room inside and have a deep discussion. I love thrilling adventure stories, so I'm sure you won't disappoint me, right?" "Of course, honorable governor's wife. It's an honor to have your company." As he spoke, the boy stood up and bowed slightly to the remaining ladies, and then disappeared into the corner at the end of the corridor with the woman. After they were completely gone, Grandin finally came back to her senses and exclaimed excitedly, "My God, is this world too crazy, or am I seeing things? The governor's wife. The governor's wife is actually with a lowly—" "Shut up, if you don't want to get into trouble." Before she could finish her sentence, another older lady sternly interrupted the latter half of her sentence. Chapter 1295. Late at night, when the guests at the banquet gradually dispersed, the governor's wife, who was only wearing a thin nightgown, her face still red from the strenuous exercise, handed the crumpled piece of paper in her hand to her husband. "Here, the thing you wanted." "Thank you. How is it? Did that kid satisfy you?" Parasa took the parchment and quickly opened it to read the contents. It was as if in his eyes his wife having sex with other men was nothing, and had even become a normal state. In comparison, the simple map and markings on the paper attracted his attention more. Of course, satisfaction beyond imagination. But the question is, are you sure this is worth it? You have to know that the nobles in the city are looking at you strangely. I can guarantee that they are secretly discussing this matter. The governor's wife asked with a faint smile. Parasa shrugged nonchalantly. "Let them be. These frogs at the bottom of the well will understand one day that the kings cannot be defied. Of course, the premise is that they can live until then, or climb to a high enough position. How is it, do you think this treasure is real?" Sensing the fear that flashed in her husband's eyes, the governor's wife decisively changed the topic. She wasn't an idiot. She knew that her husband had a bottom line for indulging her. Once the red line was crossed, what awaited her would be coldness and heartlessness. "I don't know. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's fake. It has nothing to do with me. Everything I did was just following orders. Next, I will make 100 copies of this map and give them to those people whose hearts have been dominated by greed and desire. It won't take long for them to find the answer for me." After saying this, Parasa put away the parchment, raised his hand, and snapped his fingers, his entire body instantly disappearing from the spot. About 2 or 3 seconds later, he appeared out of thin air in a huge palace located at the peak of a mountain. The palace was completely made up of blocks of crystal-clear ice, emitting a bone-piercing chill from the inside out. On the throne in the innermost part of the palace, a figure completely wrapped in ice suddenly spoke in a low and hoarse voice. "Has the matter I asked you to do been done?" "Yes, my great king. This is the treasure map we obtained from one of them. Please take a look." Parasa hurriedly knelt on one knee and raised the crumpled parchment high. In an instant, under the control of some unknown power, the piece of paper slowly floated up and stopped in front of the throne. After a while, the figure in the ice suddenly burst out laughing. "Ha ha! Treasure? Only they could think of something like that. It looks like the destruction of the last expeditionary army has made these Dalen's people timid. They're actually hiding the fact that they're here." "What? You mean?" Parasa raised his head abruptly, his eyes filled with disbelief. Those invaders, they're back. If I'm not wrong, these so-called lucky ones are probably the shapeshifters of the Second Expeditionary Force," the figure in the ice explained meaningfully. "Damn it! I'll organize my men and capture them all." Parasa hurriedly stood up and wanted to immediately return to the governor's mansion in Archie. As one of the members who had experienced the ambush operation 12 years ago, he knew very well how powerful and terrifying the Durantians were, especially the shapeshifters who could perfectly disguise themselves as any living being. They were an absolute nightmare. Even now, there are still a lot of shapeshifters hidden in this world that haven't been found. Don't panic. Compared to the powerful expeditionary force, a few shapeshifters aren't worth mentioning. We can even use these shapeshifters to send them some false information. Remember, don't let the enemy know that we already know of their arrival," the figure in the ice warned in a strict tone. "As you wish, my great king. Under your leadership, we will definitely win a second glorious victory." Parasa bowed deeply and then snapped his fingers again before disappearing on the spot. Not long after he left, countless cracks suddenly appeared on the huge ice block on the throne. The next second, boom, accompanied by a deafening boom and ice shards that filled the air, a person covered in silver-white armor walked out from within. In one hand, he held a staff that was emitting cold air. In the other hand, he held a shield that looked like a mirror. He looked down at the snow-covered mountains. After a full minute, he sneered and muttered to himself, "It's only been 12 years, and they're already making a comeback? Looks like it won't be easy to chase them out this time. Maybe it's time to gather everyone and wake up that sleeping old guy." As soon as he finished speaking, he jumped down from the palace on the top of the mountain. Like a huge cannonball, he smashed into the snow on the mountainside and caused a terrifying avalanche. At the same time, the boy still in the governor's mansion didn't realize that his probing was seen through by one of the kings. He sat alone by the fountain and enjoyed the beautiful night sky of this world. But his beautiful mood didn't last long, as it was immediately destroyed by an uninvited guest. "Although I'm very sorry, I still have to inform you that there was a small accident just now." The leader of the shapeshifters silently appeared in the corridor of the courtyard and whispered in his ear in an extremely low voice. "Accident?" The boy's eyes suddenly shot out a sharp light. As the leader of the expeditionary army, he hated hearing about accidents the most, especially in this place. The shapeshifters nodded helplessly. "Yes, accident. We found one of our kind in this mansion, and he also found us." "What?" The boy raised his eyebrows in surprise. It must be known that shapeshifters weren't cannon fodder. In addition to their shockingly low birth rate, each expeditionary army would at most be equipped with no more than 30 of them. Even if half of the shapeshifters from the previous expeditionary army had survived and were hiding in every corner of this world, it shouldn't be so easy to encounter them under normal circumstances. After lowering his head for a moment, the boy immediately raised his head and ordered, "Make contact with him immediately. Then confirm if he's still loyal to the expeditionary army as soon as possible. If not, you should know what to do." "Understood. Give me a few hours. I'll bring him to see you before dawn or bring his corpse." The shapeshifter's leader didn't waste any time and cleanly disappeared into the night under the cover of the shadows. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1296. The shapeshifter's movements were always stealthy and swift. Without alerting any guards, they easily found their own kind. Then, with the help of some simple magic tools, They successfully captured them and brought them to an extremely hidden room. There was no mercy or mercy. There was no so-called racial recognition. The shapeshifters treated their own kind the way they treated their enemies. They began to torture and abuse their own kind, even taking pleasure in it. Selfish, cold, cruel, heartless, as people who could easily blend in with other intelligent races without being discovered, they did not care about the fate of the entire race. Even if they were the only ones left, they could still live comfortably. The only thing that could make the shapeshifters learn to obey was power. Absolutely powerful and unparalleled power. Without a doubt, the magic civilization founded by the Dalent had such power. Therefore, after torturing them for about 2 hours, the shapeshifters' leader dragged their dying comrade in front of the boy. He grabbed the captive's hair and slammed his head against a hard stone pillar. Then, he opened his mouth and introduced, this guy was a member of the previous expeditionary army. However, he did not betray us. He only chose to run away from the battle. A deserter? The boy held his chin, his eyes full of scrutiny. It should be known that, according to the expeditionary army's military rules, running away from a battle was punishable by death. In the eyes of the Dalent who worshipped military conquest, running away was an unbearable humiliation. Especially on the battlefield, anyone who tried to run away would face punishment afterwards, and this punishment was an extremely painful death. Never forgive. Never forgive. Only death was the only ending. Of course, between the shapeshifter's selfish nature and the fact that the previous expeditionary army collapsed overnight, running away did not seem to be a big deal. At least for the boy, running away to save his life was nothing to be surprised about. No, I'm not a deserter. I just want to find out what happened that night. The shapeshifter, who was covered in cuts and bruises, hurriedly tried to defend himself. Shut up. Running away is running away. No matter how you explain, you can't hide this fact. The shapeshifter's leader fiercely reprimanded. Just as he raised his fist and wanted to teach this guy a lesson, the boy suddenly raised his right hand and stopped him. Wait, you said you want to know what happened that night. After so many years, have you found any useful information? Yes, of course. The shapeshifter struggled to crawl up from the ground and replied quickly, Governor Parasa, he personally participated in the operation that night. Furthermore, in his bedroom, there's a secret room that can't be seen with the naked eye. It hides some shocking secrets. Oh, Governor Parasa is one of the participants. Hearing this, the boy's eyes lit up. He had been worrying about where to find the breakthrough point, but now he had a clue all of a sudden. Yes, not only was he one of the participants, but he was also the most loyal follower of one of the kings. If you want to obtain information, you can't go wrong by starting with him. The shapeshifter nodded desperately as he explained. Interesting. Have you any means of getting into the governor's chamber? Asked the boy, looking into the prisoner's eyes. The shapeshifter hesitated for a moment before he raised his head and suggested cautiously, Madam Governor, she is the only one other than Parosa who can enter the bedroom. You mean to replace her? A faint smile appeared on the boy's face. Although from an outsider's point of view, the two had just had an extremely intimate relationship. In reality, he had only cast an illusion and then sat on the side to admire the governor's wife letting go of herself. If he really needed to let the shapeshifter eat this gorgeous woman, he wouldn't hesitate at all. That's right. Otherwise, as long as anyone approaches the bedroom, it will immediately trigger the alarm. No matter what Parasa is busy with, he will teleport back immediately. The shapeshifter directly gave a definite answer. How about it? Do you have the confidence to take care of this? The boy turned around and asked the shapeshifter leader standing on the side. The latter stuck out his tongue and licked his lips as he responded excitedly. Leave it to me. I'm already unable to endure the thirst. I want to taste the fear and despair that woman emitted before she died. If that's the case, then you're useless. As the last word left his mouth, the boy raised his hand and released a blinding arc of electricity. With a bang, it hit the shapeshifter who didn't have much skin left on his body. After a violent convulsion, the captive fell straight to the ground and breathed his last. His two terrified eyes seemed to be asking, Why did you kill me? Even at the last moment before his death, he didn't understand why he would still die, even though he had clearly told them everything he knew. In contrast, the shapeshifter leader was much calmer. He pointed at the corpse that emitted a strong, burnt smell and asked, "Do you need me to deal with it?" "Of course. Please be sure to clean it up. I don't want to alert anyone. Also, be careful. The magic power in this world isn't bad, especially in terms of detection, lethality, and destructive power." The boy reminded without turning his head. "I'll be careful." At the same time, Governor Parasa, who had returned to the mansion, was standing in a secret room hidden in the bedroom. He was quickly rummaging through a pile of things covered in thick dust. About 10 minutes later, he picked up a small gadget that looked like a bracelet and muttered to himself with a cold smile, "Ah, found it. True knowing bracers. Next, I just need to collect some blood from those damn shapeshifters. No matter who they disguise themselves as, I can clearly see their original appearance. This time, I won't make the same mistake as before." Having said that, he put the bracers on his left hand and turned around to pass through the wall that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. He returned to the bedroom alone. "My dear, you're talking to yourself alone again. Don't you plan on resting again tonight?" The governor's wife, who was sprawled out on the bed, flipped over and used a very lazy voice to tease him. "Rest? No. From now on, I don't have time to rest. You sleep first. I still have some very important things to do immediately." Parasa glanced at his charming and sexy wife, a bone-piercing chill shooting out from his pupils. In his eyes, his so-called wife was probably just a tool used to deceive others, and not a partner that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Chapter 1297. "Mance, where are the guests I invited?" The first thing Parasa did after leaving the bedroom was to find his butler and ask about the situation of the shapeshifters. He knew very well how vigilant these mysterious creatures that came along with the invaders were. If he wanted to collect all the blood in one go, he had to use some special means. Otherwise, before he could collect all the blood, the shapeshifters would quickly retreat and hide in the crowd. At that time, it would be an almost impossible task to find them. The governor shuddered at the thought that his home would be targeted by shapeshifters in the future. After all, there was no such thing as guarding against thieves for 1,000 days. Once targeted by these monsters that could perfectly disguise themselves as anyone, they would have to keep one eye open even when sleeping. Even their most trusted subordinates would have to be vigilant at all times. If they were not careful, they would lose their lives or even become food for the other party in pain and despair. He had to succeed in one go. He did not need much, just a drop of blood, and the wristband of truth could mark these monsters. No matter what form they took in the future, even if they were livestock, they would not be able to escape the wearer's eyes. "Master, your guests drank a lot at the banquet and should be asleep by now. Please rest assured, even if they are of humble origin, as long as they are your guests, I will take good care of them. I will not be rude." The butler, called Mance, replied with one hand on his chest. Obviously, he had no idea how dangerous a group of people he was entertaining were. He could even become a delicious snack for the shapeshifters at any time. "They are asleep? Very good. Get the servants to stay as far away from the guest rooms as possible. Do not disturb their sweet dreams before dawn. You must know that these guys are no longer annoying pirates and mercenaries. They will soon become members of the upper class with the merit of discovering the treasure and that batch of priceless gems." Hearing that the shapeshifters had fallen asleep, Parasa's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. He then made up a bunch of lies to ensure that no servants would come to disturb him when he took action. "Of course, as you wish, my honorable master." The butler hurriedly bowed and at the same time waved to the servants in the courtyard, indicating that everyone should leave. In less than 3 minutes, the entire backyard fell into silence. Other than the occasional sound of insects, there was no sound at all. Using the power of magic, Parasa patrolled every corner of the guest room. After confirming that there were no servants left behind, he tiptoed into the outermost room. Just as he gently pushed the door open, he suddenly felt a gust of cold wind coming from behind. In the next second, bang! The poor governor didn't even have time to react before he blacked out and fell to the ground. Only after his face was in close contact with the ground did the protective spells activate one after another. For a moment, a brilliant magical halo lit up the dark room. It's the governor. Accompanied by a surprised voice, the boy slowly walked out from the shadows of the door. In his hand was a long sword that emitted a faint purple glow. It was the hilt of this magic sword that had knocked him unconscious. One had to know that the body he was controlling didn't have any magical talent. So even if it carried an astonishing amount of spiritual energy, it couldn't cast powerful spells. So just in case, he brought along a magical weapon made by Dalen's superb skills before he left. To be precise, it was an anti-magic weapon that was specially used to deal with spellcasters. As long as one was hit by this sword, a chaotic and distorted energy field would form around the target's body. All protective spells, scrolls, and magical items would be affected and unable to function normally due to the strong interference. They would have to wait for the energy field to disappear before they could return to their original state. Looking at the viceroy lying on the ground, the boy frowned subconsciously. Before he could think of a way to deal with him, the glamorous viceroy's wife suddenly appeared at the door. She opened her mouth wide and screamed incoherently. "Ah, you! What are you doing? What's wrong with my dear husband?" "I'm sorry, madam. Although I really want to tell you that this is a misunderstanding. Since it has already happened, I can only make the best of it." After saying that, the boy turned to the corner of the corridor where the candles couldn't reach and directly ordered, "How long do you want to watch? Do it. Your will is my command, Sir Commander. Come on, delicious little dessert. Let me taste your pain and despair." In an instant, a humanoid monster covered in grayish-brown wrinkled skin leaped forward. Its arms and legs were deformed, and its joints were inverted like a deformed child's. Without asking, it was obvious that this was the original appearance of Shapeshifter. The prerequisite for them to devour a life and completely transform into the other party's appearance was to abandon their previous disguise. Then, bit by bit, they would force the prey to start to feel fear from the bottom of their heart. When the fear reached a certain threshold, the door to memory would open and perfectly replicate the target's experience from birth to the last moment before death. As for the time needed for the whole process, it varied from person to person. Some people with strong willpower could even persist for a few weeks during the process, but most people would have a mental breakdown in just a few minutes. The governor's wife was obviously just an ordinary, beautiful woman, so in less than 5 minutes, her body was already trembling uncontrollably. Then, her appearance quickly aged and finally turned into a pile of gray dust. The shapeshifter perfectly replicated her appearance and temperament. He casually picked up the sexy tulle nightgown and put it on himself. He pointed at Parasa, who was still unconscious on the ground, and asked, "What do you plan to do with this guy?" "I don't know. I'm not even sure what his goal is for sneaking into the room." The boy shrugged rather helplessly. "Should I wake him up and interrogate him?" The shapeshifter licked his lips and asked. It had to be said that this action was filled with indescribable hints and temptation. But when he thought of his true appearance, anyone would have the urge to vomit. The boy lowered his head and pondered for a moment before quickly replying, "No, not for now. How about this? You take him back first, then use your identity to observe what he wants to do. I have a feeling that this operation won't go too smoothly." "Understood. I'll take care of everything and make sure he doesn't remember anything when he wakes up." Chapter 1298. Along with the cool sea breeze blowing across the dock of Archie, a golden ray of sunlight finally rose from the sea and dispelled the fear brought by the darkness. About an hour or two later, the originally silent city seemed to have come alive. The streets were filled with people rushing to make a living, especially the powerful merchants. They all gathered at the entrance of the governor's mansion. They kept giving money to the servants coming in and out, asking them to find out if the main characters from last night's banquet had woken up. One had to know that gems, especially large and high-quality gems, were an out-and-out strategic resource in this world. Once they got their hands on one, not only could they sell it to powerful spellcasters at a high price, but they could also get closer to the other party and get 1 or 2 apprentice bots to send their children to learn magic. It was precisely because of this that the seemingly shabby boat was now surrounded by fully armed soldiers. There were also men and women wearing special badges, squatting on the boat for an entire night without sleeping, just to classify all the gems according to their uses and quality. It was not hard to tell from the excitement in their eyes that these gems were definitely not fake. Look at these low-level idiots. They were actually fighting openly and covertly over a pile of gems made by alchemy. If they knew that these gems would actually shatter or even explode once they reach a certain limit, their faces would be very interesting. The shapeshifter leader stood on the balcony on the second floor of the guest room and looked down at the merchants who were looking forward with anticipation. His tone was full of sarcasm. Artificial gems were a unique alchemy technology of the Dalan civilization. In order to satisfy the hunger for gems and reduce the price of gems, a genius alchemist invented this technology. As the technology continued to improve, the gap between artificial gems and natural gems was quickly narrowed. Today, as long as the maximum potential of artificial gems was not overdrawn, there was no difference between them and natural gems. But unfortunately, no matter how close the gap was, artificial gems had a fatal flaw. That was, once they reached a critical point, their stability would become extremely poor. Even if natural gems reached a critical point, they could still maintain their structure and would at most be consumed bit by bit. But artificial gems would shatter on the spot, and the energy stored inside would wreak havoc in the surroundings until it was completely consumed. Idiots? Maybe. But don't forget that it was exactly those idiots who had successfully wiped out a well-organized expedition army. Remember, never underestimate your enemy. The boy narrowed his eyes and replied meaningfully. The shapeshifter leader nodded lightly. You're right. I should not have underestimated them. At the very least, we shouldn't underestimate the 13 traitors who control this world. Yes, a group of people who could use betrayal to such a degree should be respected no matter what. Oh, by the way, how is our governor? The boy raised his head and looked at the master bedroom, not far from the guest room. If there was one thing he wanted to understand the most, it was undoubtedly Paras's strange behavior last night. Why would the other party sneak into his room for no reason? What kind of unspeakable secrets and motives were hidden behind this? If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of alerting the so-called kings, he would have let the shapeshifters devour him and read his memories. I'm sorry, you hit him too hard. That poor thing still hasn't woken up yet. But don't worry, our people are accompanying him. If there's any trouble, we'll definitely send the news over immediately, the leader of the shapeshifters promised. Of course, he had the capital to do so. As for the targets targeted by the shapeshifters, there was no record of a lucky escape so far. Very good. The boy nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing that. If that's the case, then let's start building momentum. If I remember correctly, those beautiful maids have secretly stuffed a few notes into your hand, right? That's right. Why? Do you plan to meet those merchants now? The leader of the shapeshifters asked with a smile that wasn't a smile. Why not? You have to know that behind these merchants, there might be some high and mighty big shot standing above. And in their heads, there's the information we urgently need. Then, the boy walked toward the stairs leading to the living room on the first floor without looking back. About half an hour later, he received the first visitor in the spacious living room on the first floor. Good morning, Honorable Mr. Banco. The great adventure story of you and your companions has now become the legend of this city. Perhaps it won't be long before it will be sung by the bards of this country and even the entire continent. The slightly fat merchant bowed and said compliments. It was obvious that he had done his homework before coming here. He had even inquired about the names and backgrounds of these people clearly. Thank you. Let's skip the pleasantries and get straight to the point. I believe you don't want to waste too much precious time on meaningless things, right? The boy looked at him with a slightly playful gaze. Ha ha, I like your straightforwardness. After all, time is money. The merchant tried to hide the surprise in his heart with a laugh. He couldn't believe that a group of almost illiterate pirates and mercenaries actually knew how to seize the initiative in a negotiation. Yes, time is money. Then, about those gems, How much do you plan to eat, and what price are you willing to pay? The boy seemed to see through the truth of the fat man in front of him. His body leaned forward slightly and posed an obviously aggressive posture. 200 top-grade gems, 1,000 second-grade gems. The ratio of rubies to sapphires is slightly higher. As for the price, I think that 90% of the current market price is reasonable. After all, with so many gems entering at once, it will definitely cause turbulence in the market. I need to minimize the risk. The merchant pretended to do some calculations and quickly gave a price. 90% of the market price? Do you think my companions and I are idiots? Turbulence in the market refers to those low-quality gems that can only be used to make jewelry. High-quality gems are always in short supply. I can guarantee that as long as we bring the gems back to the powerful spellcasters, they will be willing to pay a high price. I'll give you one last chance to quote a price. If you can't give a satisfactory price, I'll have to end the conversation between us. You have to understand that there are many merchants waiting outside, waiting to eat more gems. Chapter 1299. Merchants were always the most unprincipled and scrupulous, shameless, and even moral bottom line in the world. In their eyes, everything, including life, had a price tag that was either clear or vague. As long as someone could pay the price, they would never mind betraying their country, people, and their own kind. Whenever they had the chance, they would try to influence politics, economics, and ideology, turning everyone around them into a tool for making and earning profits. The so-called socially responsible merchants never existed from the beginning to the end. These people either wanted to create a good personal and corporate image in order to win the favor of more potential customers, increase the market share of their products, and achieve the goal of earning profits. Or they were restricted by social rules and laws, so they had to show a charitable appearance, but deep down, they still wanted to break free from the shackles and use money to buy power, so that they could become a special individual standing at the top of the pyramid. Through the power of magic, the boy managed to read the thoughts of dozens of wealthy merchants in just one morning, and knew what they were thinking in their hearts. Among them, 3 or 4 daring bastards even tried to play the trick of getting something for nothing. Greed, despicable, deceit. In order to get more shares of gems, they did not hesitate to expose the background of each other's competitors and use the most vicious words to describe those who they usually called friends. But unfortunately, these actions did not have the slightest meaning to the boy. He did not care what dirty things the merchants had in private, nor did he care who the gems would end up in. He just wanted to use their hands and mouths to spread the news of the treasure. When it was close to noon, 1/3 of the artificial gems had been exchanged for precious metals, manors, slaves, and real estate. Looking at the things piled up in the hall that were enough to make the outside world go crazy, the boy could not help but chuckle and shake his head. This is wealth. To a certain extent, yes. At least before the current order of this world collapses, you can use them to buy anything. The leader of the shapeshifters walked out from the corner of the living room, his eyes flashing with sarcasm. There was no doubt that for conquering the entire world, this was nothing at all. You're right. Before the current order collapses, these things that are regarded as wealth can provide us with a lot of convenience. That's right. Is the governor still unconscious? Was I too heavy-handed last night? The boy asked with interest as he played with the mountain of precious metal coins. After all, a long time had passed. Normally, even an old man in his 60s should have woken up by now. He was already awake, and in the company of his beautiful wife, he was trying to recall what had happened last night. You should know that the effect of the amnesia potion varies from person to person. Some people will only forget things that happened a few minutes ago, but some people will forget things that happened a few hours ago, or even a few days ago. When the leader of the shapeshifters said this, his tone revealed an undisguised gloating. You mean, he forgot everything that happened in the past few days? No, that's even worse. He forgot everything he had done and experienced in the past year. My dear, look at the furniture, the servants, and your beloved pet. Can't you remember anything? The shapeshifters disguised as the governor's wife pointed at the dozen or so servants standing in front of the bed, including the butler, and asked with a concerned expression. Even though he could basically confirm that the amnesia potion had a 1 in a million chance of producing the ultimate effect on this guy. There was no other way. For something as complicated as memory, it was almost impossible to erase it with 100% accuracy. Therefore, even the highly developed magic civilization could only reduce the error to a certain extent. Unfortunately, no matter how much it was reduced, an error was an error, and it would happen one day. Damn it, my head hurts so much. I still remember the butler, Mance, but I really can't remember these servants. Parasa held his head, his face full of pain. Sigh. All right, it seems like you really don't remember everything that happened in the past year. These servants, furniture, and pets were all bought by you a few months or even half a year ago. Only Mance is the butler who has been with us for many years. The shapeshifter gently comforted the governor, who was still affected by the potion. If nothing unexpected happened, his memory would fall into chaos in the next few days until the effects of the potion completely disappeared. Then, it would return to normal bit by bit, but the parts that were lost would never be recovered. Thinking of this, the shapeshifter's lips curled up slightly, and a hint of undetectable playfulness flashed through her eyes. She turned to the butler kneeling on the ground and ordered, "You can leave first. It's best not to disturb my husband in the next few days. What he needs now is to have a quiet rest by himself. Do you understand?" "Understood. Please rest assured, other than delivering food, I will not let anyone near the bedroom, and will not let anyone disturb the Lord." Mance bent down and bowed deeply as he spoke. As the manager of this huge mansion, he knew very well that if anything happened to his master, Parasa, he could only listen to the madam's orders. No matter what, legally speaking, the wife was the first heir to her husband's property, followed by the children. What's more, Parasa had not given birth to any sons or daughters so far. Watching the butler and the servants disappear into the corridor outside the bedroom, the shapeshifter immediately dropped the pretense of concern from before. He directly threw the muddle-headed governor aside and began to look at the magical items emitting energy waves in the bedroom. He did not notice that for some reason, Parasa's eyes were always staring at the wrist guard on his arm. From time to time, he would even frown, as if deep in thought. He did not know how much time had passed, perhaps dozens of minutes, perhaps a few hours in short, when the shapeshifter left the bedroom. Intending to find a few others of his kind to discuss the next plan, 2 rays of light shot out from Parasa's eyes. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "True knowing wrist guard? Why would I take out the true knowing wrist guard? This magical item is used to track monsters who are good at hiding through blood." Chapter 1300. Memory never existed alone. It was made up of countless scenes, characters, conversations, and a large amount of subjective consciousness and mental activities. Especially those who were logical and meticulous. They could often infer the past and future through certain details, or even 1 or 2 important items. Obviously, Parasa was such a logical and meticulous person, and he was also a powerful spellcaster. He was very clear about the use of the wristband of truth, and he quickly speculated that the reason he suddenly took out this magic equipment must be to deal with a dangerous enemy or a dangerous monster. But under the influence of the potion, his mind wasn't very clear, and he would often forget what he thought a few minutes ago. In desperation, he could only take out a pen and paper and record all his thoughts and speculations in a notebook. Every time he finished recording, he would quietly hide behind the invisible wall when the governor's wife wasn't in the bedroom. At the same time, the shapeshifters took advantage of this rare opportunity and quickly infiltrated the upper class of the city. They even used some of their talents to turn some of the young people into puppets under their control. With the expansion of the intelligence network, the boy quickly found a lot of interesting things from the messy information. For example, the 13 guys who called themselves kings didn't act like real rulers and used various methods to establish an effective political system. Instead, they imitated the feudal system of the primitive tribes and made their loyal followers control the important cities and transportation hubs to spread to the surrounding villages and towns. In the past 12 years, they almost never appeared in the public sight. Some people even suspected that they were dead or had left the world. But if you carefully checked Parasa's whereabouts, you would find that he would suddenly disappear from the world every once in a while. No one knew where he went. The only thing they knew was that after he returned, the governor would make some big moves. Among them, he would wantonly plunder resources and explore the magic fortresses left behind by the Dalent's expeditionary army. Needless to say, all these mysterious actions were controlled by the kings in the dark. That's incredible. In just 12 short years, they had quietly taken control of everything in this world. Combined with the time of their betrayal, could it be that someone predicted the arrival of that storm? The boy rubbed his chin and muttered to himself. One had to know that what had already happened would not lie. From these messy information centers, he saw a terrible conspiracy that had been carefully planned and then suddenly launched. As the victims, the expeditionary army had been kept in the dark from beginning to end. They did not even have the time to put up a symbolic resistance. If the 13 betrayers were really so powerful, why did they choose to cooperate with Dalent? If there was someone hiding behind them who could foresee the arrival of the energy storm, then they would have a lot of fun. At the same time, in a tropical rainforest on the other side of this world, a figure emitting a bone-piercing chill was sitting on a chair made of vines and flowers. He was none other than the guy Parasa had called king not long ago. Unfortunately, because his body was constantly releasing white cold air into the surroundings, the vines and flowers were all frozen in less than a second, forming a cold and cruel scene. In contrast, the beautiful woman sitting in front of him was full of vitality. She could make seeds take root and germinate with every move she made, making the seedlings that had just broken out of the ground grow and grow. The two of them looked at each other like this for a full 10 minutes. Finally, the man emitting white frost spoke first. "Those invaders are back." "Oh, so fast." The woman raised her chin and showed a surprised expression. "Yes, but I'm still not sure if this is just a test or if another expeditionary army has arrived in our world. My dear, the bell of war has rung. We don't have much time left." The man grinned and showed an extremely cold smile. "Then what I mean is, it's time to wake up those sleeping fellows. You should know very well that this time, we can no longer replicate the surprise attack from the last time. And this new expeditionary army commander is more intelligent than we thought. His shapeshifters are infiltrating the area under our control, trying to find the reason why the first expeditionary army was destroyed." Without waiting for the woman to finish speaking, the man rudely interrupted her and straightforwardly stated his intentions. However, the woman obviously didn't think so. She frowned and questioned, "Isn't it a little too early to wake them up? The wounds on their bodies haven't fully recovered. I know you're a little anxious, but the problem is that this matter isn't something that you and I can handle. We have to seek the opinions of the other two guardians." Save their opinions? Naive. With the conservative personalities of those two old fellows, they won't do anything risky. They'll definitely say that before confirming that the expeditionary army has arrived in our world, it's best to wait and see. The man mercilessly mocked his ally. This was because he had a very strong premonition that Dalent's expeditionary army had arrived. They were hiding in an inconspicuous corner, silently collecting information. Once the enemy figured out the truth, they would immediately launch a tsunami of attacks until they destroyed the last trace of resistance in this world. Most importantly, this time, there would be no mercy, cooperation, or mercy. There would only be cruel and merciless conquest and slaughter. All right, maybe you're right. But no matter what, the agreement has to be followed. Now, let's go talk to the other two guardians. After all, our fates are closely linked. I'm sure they'll understand your concerns." As the last word left her mouth, the woman opened her white right hand and sprinkled a ball of pink powder into the air. The next second, everything within a radius of tens of meters disappeared into thin air. That's right, it disappeared into thin air. Whether it was the trees, flowers, or the birds singing happily on the branches, or the animals crawling in the grass, everything was teleported away under the effect of some powerful magic. Only the bare soil was left. Chapter 1301. How is it Did you find a secret room hidden in the bedroom? The shapeshifter leader stared at his subordinate, who was disguised as the governor's wife. It had been a few days since Parasa was drugged with the amnesia potion. The entire upper echelon of Archie had fallen into the hands of the enemy, but they still hadn't found the most important place. The shapeshifter, who maintained the appearance of the governor's wife, sighed helplessly. "I'm very sorry. I tried my best. You should know that the governor's relationship with his wife isn't that good. At most, they're just using each other." How could he easily reveal the most important secret in his heart? He didn't even pay attention to me these past few days and kept mumbling all sorts of strange words. "Oh, what kind of words? Did you record them?" The leader asked with interest. "I recorded them. It seems to be an ancient language that's on the verge of being lost in this world. As for what it means, we still need the scholars to translate it. Since languages and words are different in every world, we can only rely on the local scholars." The shapeshifter explained helplessly. To be honest, if it wasn't for Parasa's clear mind and logical thinking, he would have suspected that this guy's brain was permanently damaged by the amnesia potion. "Okay, just do it as soon as possible. You have to understand that the Expeditionary Force commander we're loyal to this time is different from the previous ones. To him, it doesn't matter if the plan succeeds or fails. As long as he can return alive, he won't be punished. But if we fail, we'll be kicked out of the Expeditionary Force forever. Tell me, do you want to go to a third-rate garrison force and deal with primitive life forms all day?" As he spoke, the leader suddenly took a step forward, his entire body exuding a strong sense of oppression. "Of course. Don't worry, I won't fail." The shapeshifter quickly lowered his head and showed his most humble side. As a group with a strict hierarchy, most shapeshifters didn't dare to go against the will of their superiors. As long as there was the slightest sign of resistance, it would be seen as a challenge to the leader's position. What followed would be a fight to the death. "Very good. Remember, if you fail, then there's no need for you to exist." As the last word left his mouth, the leader disappeared into the shadows of the corner. At the same time, in a high-class residential area located at the other end of the prosperous port city, the boy was lying in an ancient and artistic villa. While enjoying the meticulous service of a beautiful maid, he asked without turning his head, "How is it? Have you found out where those merchants transported the gemstones?" "Yes, this is their route and destination. Please take a look." A short and wretched middle-aged man hurriedly stepped forward and respectfully spread out a piece of paper that had been folded several times on the table. Needless to say, he was the most famous and powerful information broker in Yaki. Only he could track so many caravans and ships at the same time. The boy picked up the crude map that was filled with solid and dotted lines of different colors and gave it a cursory glance. Immediately, he nodded his head in satisfaction. "Well done. I really didn't expect you to be able to handle this kind of thing. It seems that I have underestimated you. It's my honor to receive your praise. But I have a small question. Why are you tracking these ships and caravans? Could it be that you intend to snatch back all those priceless gems along the way?" The middle-aged man carefully probed. "Rob? No, no, no. Look at this villa and then look at my wealth. Do you think I would take the risk for money?" The boy purposely spread out his arms and showed off this luxurious villa that could be said to be one of the best in the city. From a certain perspective, he did have the capital to do so. Even the original owner of the villa couldn't help but exclaim when he heard the price and signed the contract without saying anything. With the terrifying wealth from selling the gemstones, he had already become the richest person in the city and was a few hundred streets ahead of the second richest person. "Ha, that's true. I'm very sorry. I was being presumptuous." The middle-aged man let out a breath, because in his heart, he didn't think that the young man in front of him would be willing to take the risk of being wanted and return to his previous life of bloodshed. In fact, most of the evil people's initial motivation was to escape poverty, hunger, and oppression. Therefore, when they obtained everything, they would immediately say goodbye to their past and wouldn't even want to talk about their past with their closest friends. "Okay, take your reward and leave. Remember to control your mouth. I don't want to hear any rumors." After saying that, the boy casually threw a small gray pouch over. The wretched middle-aged man quickly opened it and found that it was filled with 10 gems that were shining with blue light. Without any hesitation, he immediately bowed deeply and said in an ecstatic tone, "Thank you for your generosity. If there is a business like this next time, please be sure to contact me. It's our honor to be able to serve you." Next time? The boy smiled meaningfully. "I'm afraid there won't be a next time. Who knows what will happen in the future? But I swear, if you need any information, you can buy it from us." The middle-aged man didn't seem to realize the meaning of the previous sentence. He shrugged his shoulders indifferently and then hid the gemstone bag close to his body. He turned around and walked towards the door. Just as he stepped through the door, a black shadow suddenly rushed out from the side, followed by a shrill cry for help. But for some reason, whether it was the passers-by on the street or the smiling maids serving their masters, they didn't move at all. It was as if they were collectively deaf. About 2 or 3 minutes later, a brawny man covered in blood threw the blood-stained gemstone bag onto the table. "Here, this is yours." "No, my friend, it belongs to you now." The boy pursed his lips and revealed a sarcastic smile. "Oomph, this idiot. He actually thought he could leave alive." The strong man obviously didn't mean to be polite. He stuffed the gemstone bag into his pocket on the spot and didn't forget to mock the other party at the same time. Spellcasting Heaven's newest chapter address. Spellcasting Heaven's reading address. /29087 Spellcasting Heaven's TXT download address. Spellcasting Heaven's mobile reading address. /29087 for the convenience of next time. You can click on the collect button below to record this time. Next time you open the bookshelf, you can see it. If you like Spellcasting Heavens, please recommend this book to your friends, QQ, blog, WeChat, etc. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1302. Greed is the instinct of all life. It's the driving force that drives them to move forward. The only difference is that some people can control their greed. They know when to reach out and when to ignore things that are within their reach. Because once they reach out, they might lose their lives. The boy sneered as he opened his mouth and swallowed a fruit that the maid peeled for him. It wasn't that the servants and the people on the street couldn't hear the screams, but they were all affected by a large-scale illusion spell. Anything that he didn't want others to see, the normal people would selectively ignore it under the influence of the spell. In fact, it wasn't just this luxurious mansion. A large-scale magic circle that could affect the entire city of Archie was also being built. More than 500 Dalent spellcasters had already used the days when the governor was in chaos to quietly and accurately teleport to every corner of the city. During the day, they used transformation potions and magic to maintain their appearance and worked like normal citizens. But once night came, they would gather in groups of 3 to 5 and draw and build complex magic circles near the magic energy nodes. Every time they built a magic circle, they would connect it to the massive network. It was obvious that the expeditionary army was using this method to infiltrate the world. Once a full-scale war broke out, they could use the magic circles hidden in the city to teleport, ambush, and destroy. Of course, the most important thing was to test the 13 kings hiding behind the scenes. Ordinary people might not be able to detect the construction of such a large-scale magic circle. But the kings who had mastered a large number of skills unique to the Durant civilization would definitely be able to clearly sense the energy gathering in certain areas. But for some reason, the other party didn't try to stop it or try to destroy it. The burly man was obviously completely unaware of the enormous and terrifying forces hidden behind the young man in front of him. He sat down on the comfortable reclining chair, grabbed a bottle of wine from the maid's hand, raised his head, and gulped it down. When the last drop of wine flowed down his throat, he picked up the simple map and asked in an uncertain tone, "Are you sure you want to attack these merchant fleets and ships at the same time? What's the matter? Is the famous king of offshore waters afraid?" The boy asked with a half-smile. "Scared? When have I ever been afraid? I just don't understand why you want to get involved in this kind of thing when you already have everything you want." The brawny man who was known as the king of coastal waters stared into the other man's eyes. No matter what a person did, there would always be a hidden motive behind it. It could be wealth, status, fame, or some strong emotions such as love, hatred, jealousy, and so on. But for some reason, he couldn't find any motive from the young man in front of him. Vigilance is a valuable quality, and it seems you already possess it. That's right. On the surface, it seems that I shouldn't have cooperated with a dangerous person like you to rob the powerful spellcasters behind them or the loyal followers of the 13 kings after obtaining such an astonishing amount of wealth that could last me for several lifetimes. But have you ever thought that what you think I'm pursuing isn't what I really want? The boy leaned forward slightly, giving off an indescribably mysterious and profound aura. What you really want? Offshore King seemed to have thought of something, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The boy nodded lightly. Yes, what I really want. Do you think that this little bit of wealth and power is all that I want in life? No, you're wrong. My pursuit isn't just this little bit. I want to break free from all restraints and change my fate permanently. Tell me, who do you think can really control their own fate in our world? Those nobles and merchants who seem to be well off, or the spellcasters who have great power? Unfortunately, none of them are. The only ones who are qualified to control their own fate are the 13 kings. Damn it, don't tell me you want to... You guessed right. I want to be one of them. The boy undoubtedly spied on the king of coastal waters' thoughts and shook his finger with a smile. Don't be in a hurry to mock or ridicule me. Let me finish. I understand that if I want to be one of them, wealth and influence are far from enough. I also need decisive power. After all, they were crowned as kings because they successfully defeated the invaders and saved our world to a certain extent. Besides, do you really think we only found these gems in the ruins? What? You found something else? The king of coastal waters suddenly stood up from his chair. Yes, other than the gems, I also found this. As soon as he finished speaking, the boy slowly took out a crystal that emitted a dazzling white light from time to time. The king of coastal waters felt the shocking energy contained in the white light and wanted to touch it with his left index finger. The moment his fingertips touched the crystal, Li Yao's eyes lit up. Ha! A dazzling arc of lightning hit him, and he was sent flying 10 meters away. He couldn't get up for a long time. When the numbness from the electric shock disappeared, he struggled to get up and asked in disbelief, "What is it?" The boy shook his head with a smile. "Sorry, I don't know what it is either. But there was one thing. If it released all of its power, it could easily destroy a large city like Archie. With it, do you think it's impossible for me to become one of the kings? I need to see its power with my own eyes." The king of coastal waters didn't rush to answer the question. Instead, he raised a condition. "Okay, I'll take out a small part of the energy inside and give it to you to use. Then you'll understand that cooperating with me is the same as cooperating with the future 14th king. The rewards will be far beyond your imagination." The boy pretended not to see the greed in the other's eyes and took out a ball of violent energy and stuffed it into a few bottles prepared in advance. The king of coastal waters didn't say anything as he quickly took the dangerous and coveted bottles and left the mansion. As soon as he left, the leader of the shapeshifters walked out from a dark corner and mocked in a disdainful tone. "Are you sure this guy can attract the enemy's attention? In my opinion, he can only be used as cannon fodder, and he's not even a high-level cannon fodder. Once this matter is exposed, he won't even last a minute." Chapter 1303. Cannon fodder? The boy smiled and shook his head. "No, I think you seem to have misunderstood something. I don't expect him to be just a cannon fodder to attract attention. On the contrary, he will be a very useful chess piece. He can even play a role far beyond your expectations." Unexpected role? The leader of the shapeshifters obviously did not quite understand the meaning of the Expeditionary Army Supreme Commander. He frowned subconsciously. In his eyes, the guy known as the Offshore King could only be regarded as a relatively large pirate group at best. They engaged in a series of businesses including plundering, smuggling, selling weapons, armor, and a series of contraband goods. It was not enough to fight against the powerful land regime. Due to the hegemony of the sea, all ships sailing in the offshore area had to pay a certain amount of taxes to ensure that their ships could safely reach their destination. Even the warships of some port cities were no exception. But in this world, the era of sea power was far from coming. At best, it was only an extension of the hegemony of the land. Except for a few merchants who relied on sea trade and transportation to make a fortune, no one cared about what happened at sea. Compared to the illusory sea, people were more concerned about the output of the land, such as food, poultry, and livestock that could provide sufficient meat. In addition, the coastal king did not have any powerful spellcasters or users of other supernatural powers under his command. He completely relied on the inheritance from his unknown parents and was born with super brute strength. He could crush the hardest skull with his bare hands. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, this kind of brute force was very intimidating. But for the Dalent Expeditionary Army with highly developed magic technology, any Legion soldier wearing magic armor could easily do it. Power, especially the power that was limited by the body's innate factors such as muscles, blood, and cells, it could not be compared with the power brought by knowledge at all. It did not matter whether this power was mysterious magic or technology that strived for perfection. Therefore, in essence, the forces that the offshore king belonged to could not be compared with the 13 kings who controlled the vast land, let alone compete or even confront them. Looking at the doubts in his subordinate's eyes, the boy picked up the cup and took a sip of the refreshing drink. He casually explained, "That's right. First of all, I want to correct you or the inherent thinking of the entire expeditionary army. That is, we are going to be enemies with the entire world. In fact, we don't need to be enemies with the world. What we need to deal with are those stubborn people who prevent us from achieving our established goals." I don't understand. What's the difference? As invaders, isn't it natural for us to be hostile and rejected by the entire world? The leader of the shapeshifters raised a question. Of course there is a difference. Use your brain and think about it. Who are the people who are resisting the most fiercely? Were they poor commoners who lived at the bottom of society and couldn't even guarantee 3 meals a day? No, these poor people only wanted to live, to continue their existence in the most humble and painful way. Therefore, they are not our enemies. Instead, they might be our potential allies. Sometimes only to be bought. A few to be bought kings, twos to be bought in contrast. It was the upper-class people who held power, wealth, and status who would resist. Because they know that once we conquer the entire world, they will fall from the clouds and become the same as those poor people that they despise the most. We don't need to be enemies with the entire world. Instead, we need to divide the world into two, rope in those who can be bought, and eliminate those who must be eliminated. The offshore king is a test. If it succeeds, then I will order more people to come into contact with them. Through deception and temptation, they will unknowingly walk to the opposite side of the king. In this way, the resistance of the world will be divided, weakened, and even turned into an advantage. The boy did not try to hide anything. He openly revealed the plan in his heart. For some reason, unlike the other Dalent Expeditionary Army commanders who believed in the supremacy of power, he seemed to prefer to adopt some strategies instead of relying too much on the advantages brought by the advanced civilization. Of course, other than that, there was another reason that he did not mention. That was to find the whereabouts of his twin brother. After all, ever since Orin told him the truth about his background, he had been trying to figure out who he was and where he came from. Even though in the world that the Dalent had explored, there were many intelligent life forms that called themselves humans. Some of them were 70 to 80% similar to the boy, but their internal structures were completely different. Some had 2 hearts, and some had muscle tissue and bone density that differed greatly. It was even possible to tell from their genes that they were not the same species. I see. The leader of the shapeshifters had a thoughtful expression on his face. Just as he was about to open his mouth to say something, another shapeshifter suddenly rushed in from the outside, gasping for breath as he shouted, Not good. Governor Parasa?" He suddenly disappeared into thin air. What? Disappeared? The leader of the shapeshifters was furious. He grabbed the other's neck and asked sternly, "What happened? Wasn't he being watched all this time? We have always sent people to watch him." But he obviously noticed this and quietly created an illusion. By the time our people found out, he was already nowhere to be found. the former explained while trembling all over. It was obvious that he was afraid of his superiors and the possible punishment that he might receive. Damn it! Find him! Find him immediately, at all costs! The leader of the shapeshifters roared furiously. But before the shapeshifter on the ground could carry out the order, the boy stopped him and said, "There's no need to find him. He must have already noticed your existence. So he found a place to hide and secretly observe. It's unbelievable that a person who has lost an entire year's worth of memories could discover that we are infiltrating this city. Impossible. Our shape-shifting and disguises are perfect. There's no way there's a single flaw. Perfect? Believe me, there's no such thing as perfection in this world. No matter how well you imitate, there will still be some flaws in the end. What really puzzles me is, how did he determine that his mansion has been infiltrated and is no longer safe?" Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1304. The sudden disappearance of the governor undoubtedly cast a shadow over the originally smooth infiltration. Although to some extent, the disappearance of Parasa directly led to the decline of the power of Archie. The governor's wife, who could only be used as a decoration, for the first time got rid of the image of a slut and began to participate in the political game as the highest ruler. Including the nobles controlled by the shapeshifters, the entire city, including the army, had become the puppets of the Dalent Expeditionary Army. But the boy knew very well that compared to controlling a port city with less than 100,000 people, Parasa was the most valuable target. Only through this guy could he find the 13 kings and find the real enemy of the Expeditionary Army. As for the city-states, countries, and armies on the surface, they were nothing in the eyes of the Expeditionary Army. They didn't even have the qualifications to be cannon fodder. Relying on their strategic-level super magic, the Darantion spellcasters could wipe out millions or even tens of millions of people in one go. They could create catastrophic earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and lightning storms. What was even more terrifying was that they could tear apart continental plates and cause extremely violent crustal movements, permanently changing a planet's ecological environment and forcing countless species towards extinction. But at the same time, the spellcasters themselves were also extremely fragile, especially when they were focused on casting spells. Any external attacks would lead to terrible consequences. This was why every expeditionary army would be equipped with a large number of high-level cannon fodder soldiers. Other than maintaining the rule, the most important role of the soldiers was to protect the spellcasters during crucial battles and repel any saboteurs that tried to destroy the magic ritual. While the entire Archie city was secretly searching for the whereabouts of the governor, Parasa had already quietly boarded an inconspicuous sailboat. He left the heavily guarded dock and headed towards the endless ocean. Because he left in a hurry, he didn't know who the owner of the boat was or where the destination was. "Great king of the coastal waters, are you sure we want to work with those annoying bandits and robbers?" On the deck of the boat, an old man with a face full of vicissitudes carefully asked. "Why not? Don't you think this is a good opportunity?" The muscular man who was chatting happily with the boy in the mansion pursed his lips and asked in a playful tone. As he spoke, he did not forget to take out a small bottle that was emitting a dazzling white electric light. His eyes were filled with infatuation. "But I don't understand. What's in it for us? The land has never been our traditional hunting ground. The ocean is. If those bandits don't pay us the commission after the robbery, wouldn't our efforts be in vain?" The old man frowned and gave his opinion. Just like all living beings that had entered their twilight years, the older they got, the more conservative their character became. Sometimes, it could even be said that they were stubborn. They were unwilling to accept new things and were unwilling to change their current living environment and way of doing things. Even if it was clearly beneficial to them, they would oppose it without hesitation. Furthermore, the scope of this operation was huge and the number of targets was unprecedented for the entire pirate organization. It might even attract the attention of the king. Oomph. You can rest assured about that. No one can owe me money, and no one dares to owe me money. Otherwise, I don't mind letting them have a taste of my tsunami-like fury. Offshore King clenched his fists, and his eyes revealed a strong sense of confidence. After all, He was in his prime and had endless ambitions and desires to achieve. He did not want to be cooped up on an isolated island for the rest of his life and rule tens of thousands of subjects made up of ferocious pirates. On the contrary, he longed to be on land one day and expand his power and reputation to every city. The boy also saw through this and threw out the bait in his hand. Perhaps it was just like the saying, fearless because of ignorance. Sometimes, knowing too much was not a good thing. It would give a person an inherent understanding of the future, and they would not easily break the original framework for fear of failure and setbacks. On the other hand, those who knew nothing dared to gamble their future and even their lives. Although 99% of them ended in tragic failure, in the end, there was still a small group of lucky people who could reverse their fate and create miracles. Offshore King did not need to ask to know that he was one of these lucky people. Seeing that persuasion was useless, the old man sighed helplessly. Sigh, all right, you're the offshore king, and your will is our command. In a while, I'll send someone to send out the movement route of the caravan. I hope there won't be any problems. There's no need to wait. It'll be sent out immediately. Remember, tell all the partners in the letter that I want 50% of the profits this time. 50%? You're crazy. Those bandits won't agree. They might even decide not to give a single cent and laugh at your stupidity in public. Isn't that just right? If anyone dares to laugh at me, I'll send them to another world. Old Carter, you've been with me for 10 years. In these 10 years, we've been floating on the sea and experienced countless battles and storms together. It's time to return to land and fulfill our initial wish. W.H. What? Yes, your ears didn't deceive you. I sense time. Just as the old man known as Carter was in a state of shock and sluggishness, a commotion suddenly broke out in the cabin. Following that, a sailor abruptly rushed out from the entrance leading to the lower levels, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Great king of the coastal waters, we found a stowaway." A stowaway? Offshore King raised his eyebrows in surprise. Yes, a stowaway. This guy is quite powerful. We're no match for him. Several crew members have been put to the ground by his magic. We don't know if they're still alive. The sailor hurriedly nodded and explained. A spellcaster? A stowaway? Things seem to be getting a little interesting. What do you think? Offshore King turned and looked at the old man beside him. The latter pondered for a moment and immediately suggested, I think no matter who he is, it's best to talk to him face to face first. After all, spellcasters are a scarce resource no matter where they are. They have mysterious powers, and it's even better if we can use them. As for who he is and why he wants to be a stowaway, it's not important to us at all. Ha! You're right. Let's go and meet this interesting guy. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1305. In the dark, damp, and smelly bottom of the cabin, a group of ferocious sailors with all kinds of weapons were surrounding Governor Parasa of the city of Archie. But what was interesting was that they only blocked the only exit and didn't try to take a step forward. As for the reason for this, it was extremely simple. All those fellows that tried to approach him were knocked to the ground by some sort of mysterious force without exception, and they fell into a strange state of unconsciousness or deep sleep. Although they were certain that no one had died, no one was willing to risk their own safety. While the two sides were staring at each other, Coastal King finally came out of the dark and narrow passage and squeezed out from behind the crowd. When he saw the familiar face, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. After a few minutes, he laughed and sighed, Unbelievable! The Honorable Parasa, the supreme ruler of Archie, actually sneaked onto my ship. Can anyone tell me if this is a dream? No, you're not dreaming. I'm dreaming. A very, very scary nightmare. The governor gritted his teeth and replied. Obviously, he still couldn't believe that the invisibility spell he cast would be seen through by an idiot who wanted to steal some wine. As a result, he ended up in such an awkward state. According to the original plan, he should have silently arrived at the pirate gathering place where all sorts of people gathered. Then, he would have changed his identity and assumed a pirate ship. Using the opportunity of going out to plunder, he would have seized the ship and headed for another port city that was loyal to the king. That way, he would be able to cooperate with the other party and investigate the strange things that happen in Archie City. Especially with the constant surveillance and spying, it made Parasa feel extremely unsafe. It was as if he was living in a place full of enemies instead of his own home. But unfortunately, plans could never keep up with changes. No matter how precise the plan was, a small accident was enough to make everything disappear. For you, this is indeed a nightmare. I deeply sympathize with you. But the problem is that this isn't an excuse for you to sneak onto the ship. Now, tell me, what should I do with you? Offshore King grinned, revealing a smile as ferocious as a shark's. Back when he was an Archie, he heard that the governor had lost an entire year's worth of memories due to some unknown reason. He was in a state of chaos for a long time and couldn't make any important decisions. Even his power was usurped by the sexy and beautiful madam, and he became a puppet. It seemed that the real situation was even worse than the rumors. Otherwise, how could the governor leave behind his monstrous power and escape by himself? What do you want? Parasa narrowed his eyes and carefully asked. It had to be known that he was in the boundless ocean and not his luxurious mansion. He couldn't use a teleportation spell to teleport away. If he teleported here, there was more than a 50% chance that he would be teleported to a city, wilderness, forest, underground cave, lake, or the bottom of the sea. The king of the coastal waters, who had been dealing with vicious people for a long time, undoubtedly noticed the governor-general's dilemma. He suggested meaningfully, I'm a simple person, so I usually speak my mind straightforwardly. In fact, I don't care who you are or who you are loyal to. I only care if you can bring me benefits. Coincidentally, there's something here that needs someone to take care of. How about it? Are you interested? Is this the price I have to pay? Parasa didn't immediately give an answer. Instead, he tried to confirm something. Yes, no one can casually board my ship without paying a price. Even you are no exception. Perhaps you think you have powerful magic power, but I can guarantee that if you choose to act, my men and I will sink this ship when we realize that the situation is not good. According to the distance between the ship and the land, I swear you can't fly back even if you can. Coastal King undoubtedly knew what was in Parasa's mind. His tone was full of warning. As a formidable person who had been fighting at sea since young, he knew better than anyone how terrifying spellcasters were. However, he also knew their weaknesses. These fellows who grew up with elite education often had the habit of being arrogant. They believed that there was nothing in the world worth learning apart from profound magical knowledge. As a result, almost no spellcasters would deliberately learn to swim. Once they fell into the water, their performance was worse than a 10-year-old child. Parasa's pupils suddenly contracted when he heard this. His expression changed again and again in less than 10 seconds. After a long while, he suppressed his anger and nodded. All right, I agree to your conditions. Tell me, what do you need me to do for you? It's simple. Kill some people for me. I need them to die a horrible death. Coastal King, who had succeeded in his scheme, curled his lips slightly, revealing undisguised satisfaction. He didn't realize that what he was about to do would thoroughly anger many powerful people he had never met before. At the same time, it would also attract the attention of the 13 kings. No problem, but I have a condition. After this matter is done, you need to send a ship to send me to the designated port. Parasa took the opportunity to propose a trade. Hee, it's a piece of cake. Then, in order to celebrate our happy cooperation, shouldn't we have a drink? Coastal King turned around and personally opened the cork of a bottle of wine. He pretended to elegantly fill 2 worn-out wooden cups. Thank you. I hope this matter won't drag on for too long. Trust me, this is a joyous occasion. You'll regain your freedom in half a month at most. With the sound of glasses clinking, the two raised their heads and downed the wine in one gulp. Governor Parasa, in particular, resisted the strange taste brought by the inferior wine. He held his breath and swallowed it down his throat like he was drinking medicine. He dared to swear that he had never tasted such a disgusting drink in his life. He even had the urge to vomit. There was no doubt that the governor was fully aware of how daring Coastal King was, so the two quickly reached a cooperation. Although this cooperation had been decided from the beginning, it would definitely end in a falling out. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1306. Sea eagles were a group of extremely fast and ferocious birds of prey. However, in this world, their intelligence was far higher than that of other birds, and they were the only means of long-distance communication other than magic. As the ruler of the ocean, the king of coastal waters had a large number of special talents who specialized in raising and training sea eagles. Therefore, even on the ship, he could give orders to the pirate captains who were loyal to him at any time and anywhere. And through the intelligence network, he could learn about important things happening around the world. But now, these sea eagles were carrying important information, going deep into the land that they were unfamiliar with, and delivering letters to designated places. Leader, what did the king of coastal waters write in a letter to you? A bandit wearing tattered mail armor sat in front of the bonfire, squatting on the fresh and delicious meat soup and craning his neck curiously. But before he could see anything, he was pushed aside by a middle-aged man who was also sitting by the bonfire and replied with a cold smile, "This guy is getting more and more arrogant. He actually dares to reach the shore. But the exciting information he sent is quite good. If we can get it, we will have a stable life for the rest of our lives." "What do you mean? This bastard wants to swallow us?" Another bandit suddenly stood up, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. The bandit leader nodded lightly. "That's right. This is the letter. Take a look. Although I admit that the information he provided is very valuable, the problem is that the percentage is too high. We are not fools risking our lives to rob a fully armed caravan, and we still have to give him half for free. Most importantly, this is land, our territory. It doesn't matter if it's a bloodthirsty shark or a tsunami that can set off monstrous waves. Once it comes ashore, it will all die." "So what do you mean?" The bandit who was boiling the soup had a sinister smile on his face. "What I mean is, we will do this business, but he can't expect to get a single cent of commission. If he has the ability, he can come find us on land. What do you think?" "Ha ha, agreed. Let that idiot who reeks of fish eat sh*t. Then, should we study the specific plan of action? After all, robbing a caravan like this is not an easy thing to do. Let's spread the news first. We need to gather more people. The people we have right now are not enough." When countless bandit groups received the information, the boy had already used the shape-shifting ability to infiltrate and successfully infiltrated the upper class of Archie City. Almost every night, there would be a banquet, and every guest would be provided with the most sumptuous food, wine, young and beautiful maids, and handsome male servants. Indulgence, chaos, luxurious, absurd. Here, one could almost see the ugliest side of intelligent life that had abandoned all ethics and bottom lines. In order to pursue the ultimate sensory stimulation, they would spit out the food in their stomachs after they were full and continue to eat and drink. At the same time, they would also consume special magical potions so that they would have sufficient physical strength to engage in primitive mating activities. They would even torture and kill slaves and listen to the screams and wails of the slaves before they died. Admiring the group of fellows who were bathed in blood and laughing heartily, the boy couldn't help but sneer and mutter to himself, "Enjoy to your heart's content. Indulge yourself. It won't be long before your end comes." "Sir, the things you requested have been prepared. When do we start?" A shapeshifter hidden in the crowd carefully asked. He couldn't believe, even in his dreams, that the supreme commander of the expeditionary force, who looked far from being underage, could use such a short amount of time to make the nobles of Archie City shed their pretentious masks and become a group of true demons. No one knew if this was the release of their racial instincts or the sudden eruption of negative emotions that had been suppressed for a long time. But one thing they were sure of was that there was an extremely dark and evil soul hidden within the young body of their commander. "Oh, everything is ready? Everything?" The boy raised his eyebrows in surprise. The shapeshifter nodded without hesitation. "Yes. Under the premise of not resting in shifts, the entire system has been completely set up. As long as you nod, this city will instantly turn into a purgatory and spread to the surrounding areas at an unimaginable speed." "Very good." Hearing this, the boy's face was filled with satisfaction. "Go. Tell the person in charge to start in 3 days. I like to see how long the 13 betrayers can endure and whether they can really bear to see more than 90% of the species on this planet go extinct and become a land of death forever. In any case, we only want resources, not those so-called lives. As you wish. The shapeshifter subconsciously licked his lips as his entire body trembled in excitement. How many years has it been? Ever since the spatial ring began to operate and ensured the stability of most of the conquered worlds, the expeditionary force went from killing and exterminating species to using and enslaving them. Some of the rebels had even forgotten that the Dalents' original way of conquering worlds was by exterminating 90% of the life on a planet. But now, this extremely cruel and bloody scene was about to happen again, and the target was the betrayers who had successfully exterminated the expeditionary force. Just the thought of it was enough to make him excited. Soon, as the order was quickly sent out, the Dalent spellcasters hidden in the Archie city were eager to try. They planned to activate the magic formation as soon as the time was up and infect everyone in the city with a vicious and contagious curse. At that time, this busy port would turn into a land of death in less than a month, and the curse would quickly spread to other cities along with the merchants. When someone discovered it, half of the world would tremble in nightmares. That's right. This was the magic version of a biological weapon. Through a simple bloodline curse, it could wipe out most of the life on a planet. Whether it was intelligent life or normal plants and animals, it would be difficult for them to escape this disaster. Of course, due to the powerful magic civilization on this planet, the boy didn't think that a curse alone would be able to complete his plan of conquering the world. On the contrary, this thing was only the beginning to test the person behind the scenes. Chapter 1307. 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. When the bell that symbolized the arrival of midnight reverberated over the entire city, a dazzling red light suddenly emerged from every corner of the city and quickly enveloped every corner of the streets and alleys. In an instant, all the animals that were sensitive to danger were awakened. They either began to scream like crazy or ran out of the city in groups. In just a few seconds, a large number of scavengers with terrifying green eyes surged onto the streets, pouncing on the patrolling guards and gnawing them into skeletons. They didn't even have time to scream before they died. As the pungent smell of blood filled the air, the city of Yaki finally turned into hell. Normally speaking, it was impossible for no one to notice such a strange situation. But what was interesting was that even after all the animals had run away and the frightening red light on the streets had disappeared, the city was still in a dead silence. No one had woken up from the beginning to the end to discover all this. When the golden sun slowly rose from the sea the next morning, countless violent coughs broke the silence. Cough, 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 damn it. I'm coughing blood. Me too. Are you sick? Doctor. Call a doctor. I'm so cold. Why is it so cold? In an instant, everyone that just woke up from their sleep fell into a state of panic. It was not that they were too timid, but the illness came too suddenly and violently. In less than 2 hours, more than a third of the population in the city began to feel all kinds of discomfort. The more serious ones were already in a state of dying. But as the culprit behind this death curse, the boy remained calm. He sat on the balcony on the second floor of the luxurious mansion and ate a sumptuous breakfast while watching the chaos and panic spread. After about half an hour, when most of the food on the table was finished, he said to the leader of the shapeshifters who was listening patiently, "You can take your men and leave now." Leave? The shape-shifting leader raised his head as his eyes revealed a look of disbelief. The boy nodded. That's right. The city was done for. It will be a signal to tell all the traitors that we have arrived. At the same time, it will also be a sign that we will no longer abide by the stupid and ridiculous rules of engagement of the past. The ultimate goal of our conquest is to completely destroy all life on this planet. You have to understand that a civilization without enough population support is not worthy of being called a civilization, unless they have solved the mystery of life creation and can replicate thousands of their own kind in a short period of time instead of spending decades or even centuries. What about our mission? The leader of the shapeshifters asked carefully. Of course, we'll head to other cities and continue with the infiltration plan. If a mere city and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people around it weren't enough to raise the vigilance of those kings, I wouldn't mind doing it a few more times. In addition, select more seeds with potential. They will play an unexpected role in the future. The boy said the cruelest and most cold-blooded words with a smile. As someone who grew up under the influence of the Dalant civilization, he had never treated the natives of the conquered worlds as his own kind. Instead, he saw them as something that could be dealt with that will like poultry and livestock. In fact, when he read about the history of the Dalant civilization's conquest, he couldn't help but have a question. What was it that made these executioners, who were originally passionate about wiping out most of the life on a planet, choose to put down their butcher's knife and give up on the cheap and effective method of killing like contagious curses? Do they need to enslave the natives and use them as cheap labor? Or could it be that, with the advancement of magical technology, they subsequently invented even more strategic magic with astonishing destructive power? The answer was obviously none of those. If they needed labor, the Dalant could use cheap puppets that didn't need to eat, drink, or rest. Moreover, their efficiency and obedience were far higher than the natives who were filled with hatred. As for the continuous improvement of magic technology, it was more reflected in other aspects. For example, the Dalant had completely given up on prying into the mysteries of death overnight, which naturally included vicious curses. One had to know that this thing was different from plagues and diseases. The latter worked on the body, so once the cause was found, it was easy to eradicate it. However, the former worked on the soul and could even absorb energy from the lives that were constantly dying, making oneself stronger and stronger. When an entire city of people died, the source of the curse would become so powerful that even powerful spellcasters would have to pay a certain price to get rid of it. In the eyes of the boy, this was the cheapest, most practical, and most perfect strategic spell. After all, the purpose of conquering a world was not to rule, but to plunder resources. What was the point of keeping so many lives? When the time came, they would still have to fight against endless resistance and harassment. It would be much easier to just let them all die. Understood. I will arrange everything. With that, the leader of the shapeshifters placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. There was no need to ask to know that he had been completely subdued by this boy who was exuding a dark aura. Calm, rational, mature, cold, and that attitude of not caring about the deaths of thousands of lives. These were undoubtedly the qualities that a supreme commander of an expeditionary army must have. He had no doubt that this conquest would be an unprecedented and glorious victory. It might even break the record of the fastest conquest with the lowest self-consumption in the past few hundred years. Of course, as for whether the higher-ups would have any opinions on reactivating the infectious curse, that was unknown. After all, from the beginning to the end, there was no law that stipulated that expeditionary armies were not allowed to use the infectious curse in the process of conquering a world. It was just that it was not recommended to use it casually. So in the long run, most commanders would abide by this unspoken rule. Unfortunately, this time, the boy clearly did not intend to imitate his seniors. On the contrary, he wanted to use large amounts of infection and slaughter to strengthen the power of this extremely infectious curse. He wanted to shorten its latent time and increase the fatality rate when it broke out. It would be best if he could shorten the process from infection to death to 6 or 7 days. Chapter 1308. With the rapid spread of the curse, in less than a week, 90% of the residents in the city of Archie started to show signs of pain. Even those with weaker souls started to die in large numbers. Corpses that emitted a putrid stench were strewn all over the streets like garbage. The hot and humid climate was enough for the bacteria and microbes in a body to quickly reproduce after death. Normally, it would only take a few hours for the body to decompose. What was even more terrifying was that the large number of rotting corpses would lead to a plague. The plague would make the already panicked city even more desperate. Because there weren't enough people to move the corpses, Most of the residents were either tortured by the curse until they were neither human nor ghost, or they were infected by the plague and were lying in bed waiting for death. Only those aristocrats and wealthy merchants with power and influence had discovered this strange situation early on. They took all their wealth and family members and fled the city of death as fast as they could. They didn't know that this kind of meaningless escape was only a waste of the curse's range and speed. It didn't have the slightest effect and couldn't save their lives. Anyone who was shined by the red light would have the shadow of the curse in their soul. However, some people's souls were strong enough, so the incubation period was slightly longer. Some people's souls were weaker, so the incubation period was shorter. But no matter what, the curse would eventually break out and spread to everyone who came in contact with it, whether it was animals or plants. Standing on the balcony of the luxurious mansion, the boy looked at the disaster he directed with indifferent eyes and asked without turning his head, "How is it? Did you notice anything strange recently?" No. This city is very quiet. From beginning to end, no one has been hiding in the dark to spy on us. A spellcaster wrapped in a silver gray robe replied cautiously. If one paid attention to the slit on the side of the robe, one would notice that he wasn't a native of this world. Instead, he was a typical Dalant male. So, we didn't cause enough trouble, so those guys didn't realize the power of the contagious curse? While saying this, the boy pursed his lips and revealed a cruel smile. Just like all sudden disasters, it wasn't that they couldn't control it in the beginning. It was just that the people in power didn't realize the severity of the problem and subconsciously ignored it. They even tried to cover it up by blocking the news. As for the deaths of the civilians, they didn't care about it at all. Unfortunately, this kind of stupid behavior didn't give them the results they wanted. Instead, it made the originally controllable disaster truly uncontrollable. The Dalant male sneered and nodded. Yes, respected Supreme Commander. Those traitors didn't know the power of the contagious curse. Naturally, I didn't know what kind of effect it would have on the world. Of course, due to the relatively high level of the magic system in this world, they might have a way to break the curse. But no matter what, a large number of people will die. According to the latest reports, the curse had successfully taken root in 15 cities and towns. Soon, it would spread across half of the continent like a net. By then, it will be too late to do anything. What's even better is that we can use the curse and the negative energy produced by the deaths to summon a large number of undead cannon fodder. We can use them to fight a war of attrition and further weaken the fighting potential of the natives of this world. When the time comes, we can make use of those pawns to spread some rumors and pretend to give some benefits to those civilians who don't have enough food to eat and clothes to cover their bodies. Then, the enemy will lose their foundation and the soil for survival. The boy excitedly described the most ideal development direction of the situation, especially the illiterate civilians. They weren't treated as a threat from the beginning. In his eyes, the civilians were more like tools than living intelligent lives. They had no independent thoughts. They didn't have sufficient knowledge. They didn't have powerful strength. As long as he could grasp the pattern, he could easily control them. He could even enslave them without paying any price. They would even turn around and thank him in the end. Ah, I understand now. You want to destroy their civilization, destroy their faith, destroy their heritage. Once they're cut off from the past, the intelligent life in this world will quickly degenerate. In a few generations, they will forget the glorious magic civilization they created. They will forget their proud history and culture. They will forget how to create beautiful buildings and complex tools. Finally, they will return to their primitive tribal structure. This way, we can easily control their thoughts. We can even become gods who control their life and death. Dalant was obviously filled with a desire to research this topic. His eyes shone with excitement and anticipation. That's right. Most importantly, if we succeed in the end, then this will be a classic example that can be replicated. When the time comes, every participant will have the chance to enter an advanced magic academy. They might even become a glorious teacher. Isn't that right? The boy hinted meaningfully. You're right. This is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I can't believe that in this era, there are still people like you who are passionate about studying the true essence of death magic. The man hurriedly bowed deeply. There was a trace of humility in his tone. The Advanced Magic Academy. It was the place where the Dalent civilization imparted the highest knowledge of divine magic. It was also the cradle for the top ruling class. Almost every old fellow who had the power to make decisions had come from this academy. Relying on the connections they had and accumulated in the academy, they could easily gather a large number of supporters to cheer for them. Thus, any Dalent with the slightest ambition would view entering the Advanced Magic Academy as the most important stage of their life. They would be willing to give up everything for it. Feeling the man's rapidly beating heart, the boy couldn't help but purse his lips and smile. All right, enough with the flattery. Whether or not you can obtain this opportunity will depend on your performance. You should know that the contagious curse isn't powerful enough. I need to see an upgraded version with more destructive power within a month. Don't worry, I swear that I will definitely come up with an upgrade plan that will satisfy you. Chapter 1309. It was the innate nature of the people of Durant to act without hesitation. This special race that was born from chaos didn't seem to know how to be patient and wait. Once they had an idea, they would immediately put it into action. Of course, this reckless personality that didn't consider the consequences created countless disasters in the history of the Dalent civilization. There were even 2 times when the entire race almost collapsed. But because of this, they were able to stand out in the fierce competition and become the supreme ruler of Planet Mocha. Ever since he received the promise from the Expeditionary Army's supreme commander, the male caster who was passionate about death magic immediately put all his energy into the research of the infectious curse. As a guy who liked to go with the flow, he first began to sample, analyze, and filter the residents of the city of Archie that had a large-scale outbreak of the curse. He finally picked out 300 unlucky people that weren't dead yet. Then, he used these people to extract the small changes of the curse and used magic to magnify them by 100 times. Then, he injected them back into the soul of the test subject. Through observation, he confirmed that the changes were benign and could be kept, while the ones that were malignant needed to be removed. Finally, after the entire observation phase was completed, all the benign mutated curses would be gathered on a single person. Through devouring and fusing with each other, an upgraded version of the infectious curse would be obtained. From a certain perspective, there wasn't much difference between cultivating a supervirus or bacteria. They were both dangerous and uncontrollable. The only difference was that the curse was created by magic, so the caster had a strong ability to interfere with it. Just as the Darantion spellcaster was engrossed in admiring the natives who were tormented by the curse every day, the boy had just received an important message from the leader of the shapeshifters. He stared at the small words on the note for a full minute before he said with a shocked tone, "The missing Governor Parasa is working with the Coastal King?" "That's right. Although I know it sounds unbelievable. Our people saw Parasa helping the Coastal King clean up the bandits that didn't want to pay," the shapeshifter leader explained with a playful expression. "Haha, this is simply too preposterous. The two of them were destined to be enemies, but somehow they ended up together." The boy chuckled and shook his head. No one knew better than him the consequences of participating in the robbery of those gems. Not to mention the 13 high and mighty kings. Even the powerhouses standing behind the merchants would not let go of the king of coastal waters. The leader of the shapeshifters gloated and said, "No, that's not the most interesting part. The most interesting thing is that Parasa doesn't seem to know the plans of the offshore king from the beginning to the end, nor does he know that the city under his rule has become a complete dead city. He still wants to find allies to investigate us." Ha ha ha. Investigation? I don't think he'll be able to find any valuable information from the piles of corpses and bones. Oh, by the way, did Offshore King do anything out of the ordinary after grabbing those artificial gems? The boy seemed to have realized something and raised his head to look into his subordinate's eyes. He divided all the gems into 2 parts. One part was used to bribe spellcasters to work for him, while the other part was exchanged for currency to bribe experienced pirate ship captains and crew members. If nothing unexpected happens, he will launch an attack on several port cities along the coast in a month at most. He intends to seize a large piece of land and establish his own kingdom. When he said this, the leader of the shapeshifter's tone revealed undisguised ridicule and sarcasm. Kingdom? He wouldn't want to be crowned as king, right? The boy couldn't help but laugh. A pirate leader who relied on violence and bribing to control his subordinates actually wanted to build a kingdom from nothing? There was no systematic administrative system. There were not enough management personnel. There was no so-called experience. It could even be said that he basically didn't know anything other than robbery. Even the pirate city on the island was managed by the merchants. What did Offshore King think a kingdom was? Wearing a crown would make everyone submit to him? Was it a game of house? Thinking of this, the boy couldn't help but sigh slightly. He directly ordered, "Go, send a few people to mix into their team and give some guidance to our king. No matter what, he is currently a good target to attract the enemy's attention. We can't just watch him self-destruct." You mean, help him build a simple ruling structure? The shapeshifter's leader asked in an uncertain tone. Yes, it doesn't need to be too complicated, and it doesn't need to be too long. Just follow the simplest colonial slavery system. Let him treat all the pirates as first-class people, then treat the merchants as second-class people, and the rest as slaves. Through the cruelest oppression, exploitation, and plundering, we will quickly build up a huge army and continuously attack the inland cities. The boy had no intention of hiding his evil plan at all, and openly revealed his vicious plan. Then what about the curse? Do we need to remind him about the contagious curse? The shapeshifter's leader continued to ask. No need. The place he attacked is still far away from the city of Archie. It will take some time for it to spread, especially before the upgrade curse is successfully developed. Once it spreads, he will lose his value, and we can use it to appease the anger of the enslaved people in that area. Remember, we are conquerors, destroyers, and killers. Guys like Offshore King are just pawns to achieve our ultimate goal. After saying that, the boy stood up from the chair and stretched his arms. His whole body looked very stiff and tired. Without a doubt, the leader of the shapeshifters had also noticed this. He carefully probed, "The body that you control. This body is reaching its limit. I have been overdrawing my body's potential, and I will slowly die of old age in 3 to 5 days." The boy didn't care as he shook his arm that was almost twisted 180 degrees. He could even feel the atrophy of his muscles and the exhaustion of his organs. The most precious life force of this body was almost gone. If it wasn't for the magic energy, he would have looked like an old man in his 70s or 80s. Luckily, most of the plan was on the right track, so he didn't need to stay. When his body completely died, his consciousness would return to his body and begin the second stage of the conquest plan. Chapter 13:10. The Thousand Whirlpool Islands was a natural island protected by countless reefs, undercurrents, and large whirlpools. At the same time, it was the king of the coastal waters, as well as the home and paradise of thousands of pirates. Without knowing the safe waterways, if an outsider accidentally entered this place, even if it was just the periphery, they would instantly die without a burial place. The large number of sunken warships was the best proof. It could be said that without the help of powerful spellcasters, no army could hope to set foot on the Thousand Whirlpool Islands, let alone clear out the thousands of pirates here. There were also illegal merchants who provided the pirates with daily necessities and various supplies. With the rich returns from plundering, the port of the main island had even built a bustling city that was not inferior to any other port. Here, drunken pirates could be seen everywhere, as well as women who specialized in providing them with special services. Of course, where there were alcohol and women, there would always be fights and brawls. Compared to the severe punishment for fighting in ordinary cities, there was no doubt that the punishment here was much lighter. As long as no weapons were used and no lives were lost, everyone turned a blind eye to it. Some would even take the opportunity to gamble. Chaos, indulgence, vent to your heart's content. All of these formed the unique landscape of the pirate port. However, today, this city that should have been bustling with noise and excitement was silent. Although the inns and taverns were filled with ferocious pirates, they all maintained their composure. Even the enemies with whom they had accumulated the most grievances didn't choose to make a move at this moment, nor did they speak ill of each other. This was because a flag was hung on the fortress at the highest point of the city. It was a flag that symbolized the status and glory of the king of the coastal waters. Every capable pirate captain was invited to sit in front of the huge round table that symbolized the alliance. They whispered to each other, occasionally glancing at the silent strong man on the main seat. After about half an hour, when the last pirate captain walked in and took his seat, the king of the coastal waters immediately stood up, slapped the table, and shouted, "Quiet!" I said quiet. In an instant, the buzzing of whispers suddenly stopped. Everyone present turned their attention to the leader who had personally established the most glorious era of pirates. The king of the coastal waters undoubtedly felt this silent respect, and a satisfied expression appeared on his face. I'm sure all of you are wondering why I suddenly gathered everyone here at this time. It's because I have something very important to announce. What's so important? You should know that I gave up a merchant ship full of spices. Once we capture it, we'll definitely make a huge profit. A pirate captain who looked quite experienced said in a half-joking tone. Ha ha ha, a merchant ship filled with spices? Normally, this would be considered a significant gain. But compared to what I'm going to discuss with you today, it's not even worth mentioning. With a hearty laugh, the coastal king waved at his men at the door. Without saying a word, they immediately carried heavy wooden chests and walked in. They bent down and opened the lids in unison. Bang! In the next second, oh my God, which country's treasury did you rob? No, I don't think any country would have that much money in their coffers. Unbelievable. This amount of money is enough to build an invincible fleet of several hundred super warships. We can use this fleet to conquer any port city. At that time, the entire coast of the continent will be our target. The pirate captains were shouting excitedly as they crouched on the chests, using their hands to scoop up coins that were flickering with golden radiance. Their eyes revealed unparalleled shock and greed. Wealth. Wealth that could be seen and touched. A huge amount of wealth that could make anyone go crazy. Admiring the violent reaction of these guys, the coastal king deliberately coughed and said loudly, "Everyone, I've never been a stingy person. On the contrary, I'm an extremely generous person. Anyone who has followed me for a while will recognize this fact. Today, I'm not taking out this wealth just to show off to you, but to tell you that anyone who is willing to continue following me can share the wealth with me." What? Share? A pirate captain widened his eyes as if he couldn't believe what he heard. When I know that almost all pirates were egoists. They risked their lives to kill and plunder at sea, not for others, but so that they could enjoy the most beautiful women when they came ashore. They could drink all day in the tavern or participate in one gambling after another, enjoying the pleasure of the sudden increase and decrease of wealth. Most of the time, they would rather take a knife for their companions in battle than lend assent to their so-called good brothers or good friends. But now, as the wealthiest pirate, he was actually going to share such a huge amount of wealth. How could he not be excited? That's right, share. As everyone knows, pirates are a group of professions that never think about tomorrow after today. No one knows who will die in the next battle, or who will be injured or disabled. But I think it's time for this state to end. We need to occupy a piece of land and build a country that belongs to us. At that time, no matter if you're injured or dead, you can return to a place that can be called Jia. Even if you're too old to work one day, you can still have a piece of land that can be cultivated. Offshore King waved his arms and used an impassioned tone to entice the pirates. He knew better than anyone how much the pirates yearned for a way out. This was not only related to themselves, but also their families. Pirates killed people like flies, sometimes not even sparing women and children. They unscrupulously vented the hidden tyranny in their hearts. But when they came ashore, they would fall into an inexplicable sense of guilt. They could only numb themselves by constantly drinking and looking for women. Since this world did not have good contraceptive methods, It was common for women to be pregnant with the children of pirates. Over time, the pirate port gathered thousands of families of pirates, and even the second and third generations of pirates. As parents, no one was willing to let their children continue to engage in such a dangerous profession. So they would do their best to send their children away, or at least keep them ashore. They would never allow them to board a pirate ship. But now they had a better choice. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1311. There was no doubt that building a country from scratch was far beyond the expectations of the pirate captains, and even beyond their understanding. In the minds of most people, pirates should be free, unrestrained, and in pursuit of adventure and excitement. From the moment they boarded the ship, they had completely bid farewell to their past and embarked on a path of no return. Generally speaking, 9 out of 10 pirates would die at sea instead of aging to the point where they could no longer work in this industry. Therefore, very few pirates would think about the future and what they could do to make a living after they retired. But now, the pirate captains suddenly realized that the offshore king seemed to have great ambitions. He was trying to integrate all the pirate forces and form a huge coalition army. Once this fleet was formed, no country or city in the coastal area would be able to resist. They would be captured, plundered, and destroyed in an instant. More importantly, if he really wanted to build a country from scratch, then he would need a group of trusted aides to build a ruling system. In other words, he would confer nobility and tie a small group of elites to his war chariot with a binding of rights, obligations, and oaths. This also meant that everyone present was faced with a choice. Should they become a supporter and risk their lives, or should they become an opponent and continue to be a free pirate on the ship? For a moment, these ruthless characters who usually killed without batting an eyelid fell into deep thought. Some even looked at each other, trying to figure out what the others were planning. After about 3 to 5 minutes of silence, a guy with a strange red light in his eyes suddenly asked, "Respected offshore king, can you tell me where you plan to capture and build a country?" "Of course. My plan is to capture the 4 port cities in the south, then use the river to drive straight in and occupy the important transportation hubs along the way as quickly as possible. As for the rest, we just need to slowly nibble away at it step by step. At most, we will be able to take all of this land in a few months." The offshore king had no intention of hiding anything. He generously drew a rough area on the map with his finger. It had to be said that although he did not realize how difficult it was to build a country from scratch, his strategic vision was not bad at all. He chose a relatively isolated land. Excluding the 4 port cities that relied on the sea and land to maintain contact with the outside world, most of the towns and villages were isolated by a large swamp. As long as they were fast enough, the outside world wouldn't even know what was happening in this area. By the time they reacted, the huge pirate fleet alone would be enough to resist interference from the outside world, or even an invasion. Taros is indeed a good place to build a country. The person who asked the question nodded thoughtfully. That's right, Ereros, the legendary land blessed by the sea elves. There are a total of 2,400,000 people here, but they don't have a unified government. This is our ideal target. How about it? How many of you are willing to follow me and grasp your own destiny with your own hands and become the founding fathers of country? As he spoke, Offshore King placed his hands on the table and leaned his upper body forward slightly. His entire body was exuding an astonishing aura. No commander without an army could be crowned king. This was something he had long since realized. Therefore, if he wanted the plan to succeed, he had to obtain the support of at least half of the pirate captains. As for the ordinary pirates at the bottom, they were merely cannon fodder and consumables in the war. They were not qualified to participate in today's meeting at all. I'm willing, but there was a condition. I don't want a commission. I want a castle and surrounding villages, land, and farmers. The pirate captain with red eyes was the first to stand up. He pulled out a dagger and cut open his palm, then stretched out his bloody right hand. "Okay, after this is done, I can even confer you as a noble." "Welcome, my dear friend," Offshore King said as he did the same thing. When the bloody hands were clasped together, The faces of the two parties showed an excited and greedy smile. With the first one taking the lead, the second, third, fourth, and fifth soon stood up one after another, using this ancient and bloody pirate method to form an alliance. When more than two-thirds of the pirate captains joined, the remaining few who remained silent from the beginning began to stand out. Needless to say, they didn't want to build a country. They just wanted to maintain their identity and status as pirate captains and continue to lead their men to plunder ships without scruples. They enjoyed the feeling of killing and dominating the fate of others. Unfortunately, the king of the coastal waters had already made up his mind to integrate all the pirates. How could he allow anyone to rebel against him? He bluntly questioned the captains who were sitting motionless on their chairs. "Tell me, what are you thinking? Could it be that joining this pirates' banquet is so difficult for you? Or do you think that the commission I'm paying is too low and not worth your time?" "No, I think you misunderstood. We just don't want to take a huge risk. Compared to a city with a large garrison, I think it's easier to plunder merchant ships. What's more, ruling isn't something we're good at." An old man with a face full of wrinkles and scars stood up and carefully explained. "Oomph. This is the reason for you to reject me? Ridiculous." Offshore King opened his mouth and revealed a cold smile. He didn't even say another word and waved lightly at the door. The next second, Parasa, who was wearing a black velvet robe, walked in from outside and raised his right index finger to point at the pirate captains sitting in their chairs. Boom! A hot red flame fanned out and swallowed all the unlucky captains who didn't want to join on the spot. Accompanied by painful screams and wails, these opponents were all burned into charred corpses emitting the fragrance of meat. Glancing at the frightened and fearful eyes around, Parasa curled his lips in disdain and immediately turned to Offshore King and said, "This is the last thing I'll do for you. Now it's your turn to fulfill your promise." "Of course. I promise. You'll get a ship and enough crew. But the premise is that you have to solve the follow-up problems. You know, every pirate ship will have a lot of trusted aides. Once they know that their captain is killed, it's likely that they will start a riot. Piece of cake. Give me a list, and you'll get a satisfactory result before dark." Chapter 13:12. It was always easier to kill and destroy than to build. When night fell in the pirate port, the trusted subordinates of the pirate captain who had been killed were almost massacred. No survivors escaped. Even their families couldn't escape this calamity. Offshore King used the simplest and most violent method to send a signal to these pirates who were used to being free. From today onwards, a new era had arrived. Pirates were no longer solitary hunters cruising the sea, but could occupy a piece of land and build their own country, a true pirate kingdom. At that time, they would no longer be limited by logistics and could expand their forces to their heart's content, even becoming the supreme ruler of the sea. Sea Emperor. This was the goal that Offshore King set for himself. He was not satisfied with just being a king, but hoped to expand from a kingdom to an empire. With one order, thousands of ships would sink to the bottom of the sea, and countless rulers of coastal cities would kneel on the ground and obediently pay tribute. But what Offshore King did not know was that just as he was ambitious and calculating the date of the huge fleet's departure, the pirate captain with flashing red eyes was sitting in a room on the second floor of a tavern. He narrowed his eyes and watched the small merchant ship slowly leaving the port. After a full minute, he asked without turning his head, "Has the news been sent out?" "Yes, it has been sent out." A figure slowly walked out from a dark corner. "Very good. Next, what we need to do is to help that idiot build the pirate kingdom he imagines. I really don't understand why Sir Commander would choose to support him. In my opinion, there are clearly many more suitable candidates." As the pirate captain spoke, he greedily licked his lips, his two eyes staring at the captive tied to the bed not far away. "Sir Commander's wisdom is not something you and I can understand. Don't forget, he is the first non-Dalent Expeditionary Army Supreme Commander in nearly 600 years, and he is still a child." As soon as he finished speaking, the figure finally revealed himself under the faint candlelight, a shapeshifter without any disguise. "Hee, you're right. I'm just complaining. You know, in this kind of place full of prey, you can't suppress the restlessness in your heart. Can you imagine the feeling of being able to smell delicious food, even with your eyes closed? Most importantly, you have to restrain yourself. You can't casually enjoy it. It's simply a form of torture. With that, the pirate captain removed his disguise and revealed his true appearance as a shapeshifter. Needless to say, they were the candidates sent by the boy to monitor and control the offshore king's camp. No, I can understand. In fact, ever since we came to this world, our compatriots have been enduring this inhuman pain and torture all the time. But don't forget, as long as the conditions permit, we can still taste the delicious snacks. What do you think? The shapeshifter walked out of the darkness and came to the window. It bent down and stuck out its long and thin tongue, licking the unknown woman's face gently. Woo-woo-woo. The rather beautiful woman was obviously frightened. She began to struggle and scream with all her might. Unfortunately, her mouth was gagged, and her hands and feet were firmly fixed, so no matter how she struggled, she could not escape the tragic end. Fear, despair. This taste is amazing. Tell me, where did you find this delicious snack? The shapeshifter gently stroked the woman's cheek, his voice full of excitement. She is the mistress of the offshore king, and the only one who can walk into the depths of his heart. How is it? Are you satisfied with the identity I prepared for you? The shapeshifter who changed back into the pirate captain asked with a smile that was not a smile. The former hurriedly nodded. Satisfied? Of course. Walking into the target's heart, deeply understanding his thoughts and wishes. Isn't this the ultimate goal we pursue? I really hope that one day, Sir Commander will give the order to get rid of this ambitious guy. At that time, I'll be very happy to stab him when he's at his happiest. I believe that at that moment, his expression will be very interesting. You're still as wicked as before. All right, don't waste time. Hurry up and eat. You must know that if this woman disappears for too long, I'll be in trouble. As you wish. The shapeshifter's eating process was undoubtedly very cruel. It could even be described as painful and bloody. They would first use their saliva-covered tongue to lick the food all over the body. Then, starting from the eyes, they would dig out the other party's organs one by one and swallow them whole. Because the saliva had a certain numbing effect, when the body was torn apart and the organs were removed, the food would not feel pain, but would instead have an inexplicable sense of pleasure. When more than a third of the body's organs were removed, all the pain would explode in an instant, directly destroying the food's rationality and will, turning it into a walking corpse. In this way, the shapeshifter could unscrupulously pry and copy the memories of the food, finally achieving the effect of a perfect disguise. About an hour later, when the shapeshifter finished eating and appeared on the street in a different state, the woman had completely disappeared, whether it was the body or the soul. The poor offshore king did not know that his mistress had been swapped. After returning to his residence, as usual, he hugged the woman that he was infatuated with and began an intense and crazy intimacy. He simply did not understand that his every move was being watched by others, including his most private actions. What a strong body. What an interesting bloodline. I really hope that I can obtain it one day. The shapeshifter disguised as a woman was lying on the bed, muttering to himself in an extremely infatuated tone. As someone who had been influenced by Dalen's highly developed magic civilization since birth, he could naturally sense how unusual the blood flowing in the body of the offshore king was. If he could successfully bring back a living specimen, he could even obtain a large sum of money from certain research institutions. More importantly, eating a target with a powerful bloodline could strengthen the shapeshifter's abilities, increasing their potential in certain aspects, and perhaps even completing a transformation. No shapeshifter could resist such a temptation. Unfortunately, other than enduring, he did not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, what awaited him would be the most severe punishment of the expeditionary army. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1313. In the middle of September, year 3728 of the Reclamation Calendar, more than 700 warships of various sizes and more than 10,000 fully armed pirates had gathered and left their lair. They sailed through the wind and the waves toward their target. especially the large sails that were dyed in a variety of colors. They looked unusually bright from afar, like flowers blooming on the surface of the water. Without a doubt, with the strength of an iron fist, the king of the coastal waters had finally united all the pirate forces and attacked the crown of his dreams. Even a fool knew that this operation could only succeed. Otherwise, he would lose not only a precious opportunity, but also the prestige that he had painstakingly built up over the years. The rebellious pirates would not allow a person who had lost his prestige and reputation to continue to be their leader. At that time, he would most likely be killed by the pirate captains who had secretly colluded with each other. At the very least, he would be cruelly exiled and would never be able to return to the 1,000 Whirlpool Islands. Feeling the excitement, agitation, and worry in the air, the shape-shifting monster disguised as a pirate captain raised the corner of his mouth slightly. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Is it finally starting? I hope the commander will make arrangements as soon as he receives this information." At the same time, far away on the other side of the sea, in the Expeditionary Army's magic fortress, the boy had already given up on the body that had exhausted its vitality. He was sitting alone in the central hall of the Arrow Tower, playing with a letter that had just been sent back by long-distance teleportation magic. After a full minute, he raised his head and asked in an uncertain tone, "How's the research on strengthening the infectious curse going?" "Currently, there's already some progress. We found 2 evolutionary options. One is to greatly increase the death rate and let the curse exterminate all life in a city and the surrounding area in a very short period of time. Finally, the accumulated fear, despair, and resentment will be injected into the land, making it impossible for life to survive. The other is to increase the infection rate and make the infected suffer more. It may even cause them to do some crazy things, such as attacking and killing every living thing around them. Moreover, every living thing that is killed by the curse will be turned into an undead due to the strong resentment produced before death." A male Dalent spellcaster replied excitedly. After all, curses weren't meant to be used against the strong. Instead, they were meant to be used against the weak. Therefore, the threshold for research was not very high. In addition, the basic structure of the infectious curse was already quite complete. Therefore, a series of modifications and optimization from the original level was enough. "Very good. Keep the 2 evolutionary samples. I may need them in the future." The boy nodded with satisfaction. The male spellcaster hurriedly bent down and bowed deeply. "Understood. Rest assured, I will produce enough as soon as possible. I can guarantee that at least 90% of life in this world will be completely annihilated at your command. Don't rush. You have to understand that killing and destruction are only means to serve the purpose of conquering this world, not the ultimate goal. Pure slaughter and destruction are not desirable. We should learn when it is necessary to kill and when to show mercy. The hearts of intelligent beings are very complicated. You need to understand them well enough to control them." When he said this, the boy's eyes were like a pool of water, calm and deep. "Then what about the offshore king? Based on his current strength, it will take at least a few years for him to conquer such a large piece of land. Are we just going to watch and not give him a push from behind?" The leader of the shapeshifters also stood up and voiced his opinion. As the person in charge of the Expeditionary Army's intelligence, he knew very well how much danger was hidden behind the seemingly peaceful world. In fact, the coastal king did not have a few years to conquer cities and build a fantasy kingdom for the pirates. Once the 13 kings hiding behind the scenes made a move, even if it was just one of them, he would be instantly sent from heaven to hell. In the face of absolute power, numbers, terrain advantage, and meticulous planning were all not worth mentioning. There's no need for that. I've already set up a stage for him. At the same time, I've also given him some interesting knowledge and ideas. If nothing goes wrong, it won't take long for his dream to come true. However, the price is that more than 40% of the ordinary citizens on that land will die. The remaining 60% will also spend the rest of their lives in pain and struggle." The boy shook his head and explained with a smile. "Needless to say, the so-called knowledge and ideas he mentioned were the cruelest slavery and high-pressure policies. In short, it was to use the leaders who occupied the area first to rule the occupied area later and give them certain privileges to establish a strict hierarchical ruling structure. In this way, in this world that did not have the concept of countries and nations for the time being, the lower class would easily be separated by the concept of territory. They would constantly fight and hate each other to consume their strength. In order to gain an advantage in the competition, they would even try harder to please the high and mighty occupiers. Divide, disintegrate, create contradictions. This was the only way for an outsider to rule over an occupied area. Although the boy did not know how this knowledge came out of his head, he did not mind giving it a try. It sounds like you've arranged everything. But what do we need to do? Do we just wait like this? The shapeshifter leader carefully probed. As everyone knew, in the expeditionary army, where the Dalent occupied the absolute dominant position, if the non-Dalent people want to climb up, they had to do their best to show off. At the very least, they had to know what the Supreme Commander was thinking about and what the next big move was. Obviously, this shapeshifter leader was a little unwilling to only be responsible for the work of intelligence gathering and deciphering. Instead, he wanted to go one step further and participate in important decisions. The boy undoubtedly noticed this as well and responded meaningfully. Wait? No, that's not my style. Next, we'll set off a frenzy on a worldwide scale. Do you still remember when we first arrived? Those small squads that hunted down the remaining members of the expeditionary army? Next, we'll also use small squads as a unit to unscrupulously hunt down those idiots who dare to attack the expeditionary army. We'll use pain, despair, blood, and death to tell everyone what kind of price they have to pay to be our enemy. Remember, as invaders, one of our greatest weapons to conquer the world is fear. Therefore, we must arouse the fear in the hearts of the natives and make them tremble from the depths of their souls. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 13-14. In a dense primeval forest covered in white snow, more than a dozen fully armed mercenaries were spread out, carefully searching for the faint footprints on the ground. Ever since they learned that the Dalent had appeared in this place, they had spared no effort to come here from afar, just to obtain the high price of slaves that no one could refuse. One had to know that a Dalent slave, regardless of whether it was a male, a female, or an adult child, was worth more than 10 times or even dozens of times more than other slaves. The reason was simple. First of all, they were once invincible invaders, as well as the high and mighty rulers. Therefore, from the dark side of their personality, every native yearned for a chance to ruthlessly step on them, beat them up, scold them, and humiliate them to make up for the double damage they had suffered mentally and physically. Secondly, the Dalent were born with powerful spellcasting talent, which was beyond the reach of most races. Therefore, no matter how much the natives loathed and hated the Dalent, they were very eager to obtain the power that they possessed. The simplest way was to use the males or females among them to mate with the natives and give birth to mixed-race offspring. Then, generation after generation of mixed-race offspring would continue to be mixed until there were no traces of the Dalent in them. Due to the fact that the Durentians had modified the genes of their race with magic long ago, and even fused the powerful genes of other races into their race, they were able to produce offspring with most life forms, even those that weren't humanoid. There were very few instances of reproductive isolation. Finally, and most importantly, almost every gladiator arena hoped to obtain a Dalent and let them fight with the most famous gladiators on an important day. The gladiators would use their blood and death to entertain the audience, as well as the rulers with power and authority. There was no doubt that this was a team that was quite experienced in tracking. When one of the men wearing a leather hat found a relatively new set of footprints, he immediately waved his right hand frantically, gathering his companions who could see it nearby. About 2 to 3 minutes later, 6 men and women quickly gathered around. One of them, who looked quite young, asked impatiently, "What did you find?" "Here, a row of relatively new footprints. If he was not mistaken, this should have been left half an hour ago. After all, They needed to hunt and go out to collect oily firewood. In addition, they couldn't go too far from their hiding place, so there weren't many places to choose from. According to my experience, the cave halfway up the mountain is probably their lair, the man in the leather hat answered confidently. Awesome. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take action. You should know that the price of Dalent slaves has tripled recently. If we can catch about 10 of them, we can take the money and retire with glory. We don't have to do this business anymore. Another man who looked quite old grinned, his face full of excitement and expectation. Just a few of us? Aren't we going to wait for the others? We're not waiting anymore. The Dalent's men are a group of very alert people. If they notice anything unusual, they will immediately run away. Agreed. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Let's do it. After all, they were just a bunch of stray dogs. We are enough. In the end, under the principle of majority rule, the 7 people quietly approached the cave halfway up the mountain with a mood of getting rich overnight. The man in the lead had just approached the cave when he immediately felt that the surrounding environment had risen slightly. He stuck half of his head out and looked inside. Sure enough, he found that in the depths of the dark cave, there was a faint trace of light. There were people, and they were making a fire. He immediately made an accurate judgment in his mind, and at the same time, he turned around and made a few gestures to his teammates. The latter understood tacitly and took off their heavy backpacks. They took only their weapons and began to explore the cave, leaving only one person responsible for guarding the cave entrance to prevent people from suddenly coming in from outside or prey escaping from inside. The cave was very deep. The group of people moved forward about 10 meters with their backs bent. Suddenly, a silver light appeared out of nowhere from the darkness. The next second, no, 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 help, help me. Accompanied by a hair-raising scream, one of the female members of the group was taken away by the silver light. Before they could react to what had happened, the female's corpse was thrown far away and fell to the ground with a thump. The pungent smell of blood could be smelled even from a few meters away. With the help of the weak light, every member of the team could clearly see that their comrade, who was still alive a few seconds ago, was now completely naked. His limbs had been sawed off by some kind of sawtooth weapon, his chest had been cut open, and his organs and internal organs were scattered all over the place. The most frightening thing was that on her forehead, a small word had been carved by a sharp object. Fear. Duh. Damn it. What the hell was that thing? The young man couldn't help but shiver, cursing in a low voice. It wasn't just him. The remaining people in the group all gasped at the same time. I don't know, but I know one thing, and that is that we should retreat. Immediately. Immediately. The man in the lead shouted as he ran for the door without looking back. As an experienced veteran, he was very clear that with the silver light's terrifying speed, even if everyone worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat it. The only chance of survival now was to run. If they split up and ran on their own, there would be 1 or 2 lucky ones who could survive and bring back the news. But unfortunately, when the strange laughter sounded, the man at the front of the group was blocked by the silver light before he could reach the cave entrance. Crack, crack, crack. Along with the sound of the stone beneath their feet colliding, the silver light finally revealed its true appearance. It was a Dalent warrior covered from head to toe in magical armor. It wasn't the stray dog these adventurers were expecting, nor was it an unarmed member of the previous expeditionary force who could only struggle at death's door. Instead, it was a magic-armored warrior who could easily kill hundreds of elite soldiers. Oh my God! After the man realized what kind of mistake he had made, he fell to the ground with a thump, completely losing the will and courage to resist or escape. This was because he had seen a Dalent magic-armored warrior before, and he knew how powerful it was. For a moment, the once-forgotten fear once again descended upon the adventurer group's heads. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 13:15. You lowly, inferior creatures. Tell me, what were you talking about just now? Capturing and enslaving the noble Dalent? The warrior whose body was covered with a dazzling light blue magic armor was taunting them with the language of this world as he slowly approached them. Needless to say, the actions and attitude of the other party had thoroughly angered him. His eyes were filled with the flames of anger. I think this is a misunderstanding. Please give us some time to explain. The leader of the group quickly retreated while trying to use words to resolve the crisis. Unfortunately, the warrior Dalent did not want to listen to any explanation. He directly rushed forward with lightning speed and waved the sharp weapon that was embedded on the outside of the arm guard. In an instant, the warrior pierced through the man's body. Puff! Viscous blood gushed out from the wound. In just a few seconds, the ground under the man's feet was dyed red. Although the man struggled desperately to get rid of the sharp weapon that pierced through his abdomen, the more he struggled, the more blood he lost. After a while, his resistance became weaker and weaker until his pupils slowly dilated and lost the last bit of life. Without a doubt, the man in the middle was dead. He died from excessive blood loss and severe pain caused by his internal organs being torn apart. The merciless warrior Dalent purposely did not aim for the heart or other fatal parts of the body in order to let the target experience more torture before he died. After doing all this, he suddenly threw the body over his head and waved his right arm at a speed that was almost impossible to be seen by the naked eye. In less than 1 or 2 seconds, the man's body fell to the ground. It was almost the same as the horrifying female corpse. No, 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 don't come here. Don't come here. Go away. Demon, stay away from us. Ah! The remaining survivors were obviously scared out of their wits. Some of them began to scream like crazy. Some of them turned around and ran into the cave, not caring if it was a dead end or not. Some of them pulled out their weapons and rushed forward, trying to use death to free themselves from the fear that came from the depths of their souls. Just like the philosophers often mentioned, the scary thing was not the thing that scared you, but the fear itself. To some extent, fear was a psychological cue that a person imposed on himself. It was often triggered by certain specific things, and then through a series of associations and imagination, the result was finally obtained. It was clear that the survivors were not afraid of the warriors of Durant, nor were they afraid of his powerful magical armor. Instead, they were afraid of the bloodthirsty, cruel, and merciless invaders that had been circulating among the people. As for the next part, it was naturally a one-sided massacre. As the weaker party who had lost their cool and the will to resist, the few survivors did not manage to escape the slaughter of the Dalent warrior. Without exception, they were all blocked in the depths of the cave and executed one by one. The miserable screams of despair lasted for 7 to 8 minutes before they finally quieted down. Looking at the incomplete corpses on the ground, as well as the intestines and other internal organs that were scattered all over the place, warrior Dalent gently wiped off the bloodstains on his armor. Then he lifted up his helmet and took a deep breath of the air that was filled with the stench of blood. Then he smiled coldly and muttered to himself, "Ah, awesome. This was the wonderful taste of revenge. The shame of the previous expeditionary army's annihilation will be washed away by our own hands. No one can look down on or insult the Dalent people. The lowly natives of this world must pay for their own actions. That's right. They must pay with their blood. Well done, my friend. I didn't expect you to have dealt with all these trash in such a short time." Along with the deep voice, another warrior Dalent, who was also wearing a magic armor, walked out from the darkness. It could be seen that he had just gone through a battle not long ago. There were still a few bloodstains on the surface of his armor. Oof. These guys are just a bunch of cannon fodder who sold their lives for the bounty. There is no glory in killing them at all. What I really care about is how the 13 betrayers managed to destroy tens of thousands of elite soldiers who were protected by magic enchantments at all times. Don't forget, in terms of combat power, they're not much different from you and me. After saying that, the Dalent who took off his helmet bent down and began to rummage through the corpses for valuable items. Of course, this valuable did not refer to the spoils of war, but to the valuable information that the corpses might have on them. Isn't that why His Excellency the Supreme Commander did not rashly give the order for us to launch an all-out attack on the seemingly defenseless world? The Darantion who came later did not move an inch. Isn't that why His Excellency, the Supreme Commander, did not rashly give the order for us to launch an all-out attack on the seemingly defenseless world? He is waiting for those who are hiding behind the scenes to jump out themselves. I have to say, he is more like a pure Dalent than you and I. He has a series of excellent qualities, including calmness, rationality, cunning, intelligence, and cruelty. I have never denied this point. This was especially so when he personally initiated this operation to awaken fear. Through blatant revenge, he announced to the world that we were back. Not only would it make the people who were about to lose their respect for us remember the fear of being dominated, it would also force those who were hiding in the dark to find a way to continue hiding. Also, I seem to have found something very interesting. The Dalent who was squatting on the ground and rummaging through the corpses suddenly stood up and waved a note soaked in blood. What's written on it? Well, it seems to be a bounty commission. I'm not familiar with the words of this world and can only understand a small part of it. The general meaning is that a slave merchant named Class wants to buy a batch of Dalent slaves at a high price so that he can perform an unprecedented bloody battle on the birthday of a certain dignitary. Oh, what's the location? Passa. It's a city about half a month away from here. How about it? Are you interested in going together and giving them a big surprise? Just the two of us? No, of course not. We need to contact some of our companions who are carrying out missions around. About 10 warriors and 2 spellcasters are enough. I understand. You want to use a killing feast to awaken the fear of the expeditionary army and the natives of this area. You guessed it. Think about it. How can killing these low-level cannon fodders be more effective in awakening fear than slaughtering a city? If it weren't for His Excellency, the Supreme Commander, temporarily forbidding the use of those enhanced infectious curses, I would be very happy to send them all to their deaths. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1316. Without a doubt, as a mature and highly developed magical civilization, the Dalent people had a strong sense of racial and cultural identity, as well as an innate arrogance. Therefore, when they found out that their people were captured, enslaved, and even killed for fun by those who viewed them as inferior life forms, they would instantly become furious and think of all ways to take revenge 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times. As for the method of revenge, it was very simple, and that was simply an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Ever since the small team began to act as a unit, in less than a month's time, the boy had already received more than 1,000 revenge massacres. Thousands of villages and towns completely disappeared in the process, and some densely populated big cities did not escape the disaster. It was not that more than half of the residents were killed. The city was almost completely destroyed, and the entire city was turned into ruins overnight. With the advantage of magic and technology brought by the civilization, they could easily kill the natives of this world like crushing a bug. Even if they were stopped by fully armed soldiers, they could still kill their way out and escape unscathed. In addition, with the help of spellcasters, any form of pursuit would not have any effect. For a moment, there were people everywhere talking about the revenge of the undead invaders, or rumors of their rise again. No one knew that the recent killings were not about the rise of the undead, nor was it about the revenge of the undead. Instead, it was the arrival of another expeditionary army that was actively planning to conquer the world again. Interesting. Do you know what I saw from these reports? The boy sitting in the central steeple of the magic fortress raised the black slate in his hand and asked. The leader of the shapeshifters standing at the side lightly shook his head. I don't know. I feel panic and fear from these reports. Those who had destroyed the previous expeditionary army are afraid, even fearful of our strength. It is obvious that they did not destroy the previous expeditionary army with their true strength, but used some kind of conspiracy that we are not aware of for now. This also means that in terms of absolute strength, we have the upper hand. The boy raised the corner of his mouth and revealed a meaningful smile. Then what do you plan to do next? Tear off the disguise and launch an all-out attack, or continue to act according to the original plan? The leader of the shapeshifters carefully probed. An all-out attack is not urgent for now. Let's first double the size of the scattered squads. Also, Inform that guy that it's time to spread the two improved contagious curses. I want to see more than 30% of the life on this planet go extinct within 3 months, and more than half of the land become a land of death. The boy mercilessly gave an extremely cruel order, even though the shapeshifter leader had long anticipated this day. When he heard the order, he couldn't help but shiver. He hurriedly bowed deeply and said, "Understood. Your will is our command." One had to know that there were hundreds of millions of living beings. Not only were there intelligent life forms, but there were also all kinds of animals and plants. Most importantly, this process was irreversible. Once it turned into a land of death, the entire planet would die completely. Apart from the undead, there would no longer be any life in the true sense of the word. Fear. The fear of the unknown. The fear of death. It was no wonder that the Darantion civilization would slowly distance themselves from this cheap and destructive curse weapon. It's not that they don't understand the advantages of this weapon, but they don't want every world they conquer to only have undead. The pursuit of a better future, the pursuit of a happy life. What a foolish, ridiculous, and shallow behavior. It seems that even if the Dalent people have the ability to kill the gods, they're still just a group of mortals. They can't escape the ignorance and short-sightedness of mortals. Looking at the back of the shapeshifter leader gradually disappearing, the boy held his chin and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. He didn't know when it started, but he was no longer full of respect for the powerful magic civilization that raised him like before. Instead, he noticed an extremely fragile side behind the illusion of prosperity. At the same time, far away in the distant corner of the red nebula belt of the material universe, on the planet Mocha, the members of the Supreme Council of the Dalent civilization were sitting together and holding the most important emergency meeting in recent years. Everyone, I think you should all be very clear about what the content of this meeting is going to be discussed. That's right. We have just received news from another world that has yet to be reconnected. Another boy who appeared 12 years ago has been found. A person in charge of the meeting took the lead and spoke with a serious face. Found? Where is he? Another guy who was emitting a faint red light from head to toe suddenly stood up, his tone full of excitement and agitation. "Don't rush. Please keep quiet and let me finish." The meeting host raised his hand and motioned for the other party to be calm. Then, he raised his finger and created a moving illusion out of thin air. The short figure in the illusion was none other than Luke, who was walking alone in the endless desert. As we all know, the unprecedented energy storm 12 years ago destroyed one of our greatest inventions. At the same time, there are also two mysterious babies. One of them is obviously the little guy who has shown an indescribable and terrifying talent over the years, and is now leading an expedition to reclaim one of the worlds. Of course, we know who he is. We also know what he has been doing all these years. Please get to the point. A female Dalent in the corner urged impatiently. The meeting host obviously didn't care about the other party's rudeness. He smiled and nodded. Of course. What I want to say is, do you still remember the 2 dark blue crystals that appeared with the 2 children? After 12 years of research, we have successfully extracted a drop of blue liquid from one of the crystals. At this point, he suddenly paused and created another moving illusion. However, this time, the illusion didn't show a person, but a frozen building. In this building, no matter if it was a person or anything else, everything was maintained in a state of absolute stillness. Even the space was frozen into a distorted state, completely isolated from the surroundings. This is, unbelievable. How did this happen? Some kind of magic? Or something else? No, this isn't magic at all. Don't tell me this is the result of that drop of dark blue liquid that was extracted from the crystal? For a moment, the originally quiet meeting room suddenly became lively. Chapter 13:17. Stop. In this sacred place, I ask everyone present to remain calm. You guessed right. What I'm showing you now is a drop of dark blue liquid extracted from the mysterious crystal. As for the result, you've also seen it. With just one drop, it completely froze everything within a radius of a few thousand meters. Of course, the word frozen is not a very accurate description of what happened in this area. Because in this area, everything that we can know, including time, space, energy, and matter, all fell into an absolute standstill. Even the weapons used to kill gods could not cause even the slightest bit of damage. So, I have reason to believe that the two babies did not appear due to some kind of coincidence as originally speculated. On the contrary, their appearance is very likely to be arranged. I believe that Orin has the most right to say about this. After saying that, the host of the meeting looked at advanced instructor Dallant, who was standing not far away and listening. When the latter heard his name, he immediately took 2 steps forward and bowed deeply to the old men sitting in the chairs. "It's my honor. As the boys' caretaker, you can now tell us all the unusual things that he has shown over the years without missing a single detail. Remember, your words will determine the future of the entire civilization." The host of the meeting reminded with a serious expression. "I understand." Orin nodded seriously. Simply put, he has shown unusual intelligence and precociousness since he was very young. Perhaps it's difficult to understand how he differs from his peers with outstanding talents just by saying this. But you just have to imagine, under normal circumstances, a baby's way of thinking should be like a blank sheet of paper. Shouldn't it be influenced by the knowledge he has been exposed to, the surrounding environment, and the teachings of adults? But he's different. His way of thinking seems to have been fixed since he was born. No matter how much I try to influence, correct, or even guide him, he can learn, think, and even create many concepts that even I can't understand in his own way. I strongly suspect that he and his race have an innate talent that allows them to pass on the experience and knowledge accumulated by the previous generation to the next generation through the bloodline. Wait! A Dallant man who was so old that he looked like a dried corpse suddenly interrupted Orin's words. With a slightly dignified voice, he questioned, "You mean to say that we've been doing useless work all these years?" That child knew from the beginning that he was different from us and would not choose to integrate into our civilization? Yes. Orin gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. As the person closest to the boy, he could clearly feel that as the boy grew older, the dark side in his heart grew bigger. The Dallant people who were passionate about conquering worlds were even colder and more heartless. It was obvious that this was not the inner world that a boy should be displaying. There must be some unknown power that was exerting a huge influence on him. "Looks like our initial plan has failed, hasn't it?" The mummified old man pursed his lips, his tone full of sarcasm. No, it was still too early to say that he had failed. At the very least, he hasn't betrayed us yet. Instead, he's leading an expedition to reconquer that world. Besides, don't we have a backup plan? The power of the bloodline is the most important. As long as his bloodline can be integrated into us, we'll figure out what happened to him sooner or later. Patience is a precious quality. It's not a good habit to jump to conclusions, another old man retorted. In truth, the Dallant people had always been divided into 2 opposing factions when it came to dealing with the boy who had suddenly appeared 12 years ago. One faction believed that the child should be sent to a laboratory for in-depth research before he could resist. It would be best if they could use cloning or hybridization to directly figure out where the inconceivable and terrifying magical talent came from. The other faction believed that they had to be extra careful when dealing with a unique and incomparably precious intelligent life. It would be best if they could integrate him completely into their society. That was why Orin was the nominal teacher. Huh, didn't you hear what Orin said just now? That child has some kind of inherited power. He won't be affected by the outside world. Think about it from another perspective. If you realize that you look different from everyone around you, and at the same time, there's a huge gap in the way you think, would you still think that you're one of them? No, you won't. You'll either think that you're an anomaly and gradually develop a sense of alienation and strangeness. Admit it, your beautiful idea has failed. At the same time, you've created a monster. A monster that has learned the most advanced technology and knowledge of the entire civilization. The mummified old man tore off the last layer of concealment mercilessly. Just as the other old man was about to say something, the chairman of the meeting finally couldn't help but shout, "Enough! We're not talking about how to deal with the boy now. We're talking about the crystal he's carrying, as well as the dark blue liquid sealed within the crystal. First of all, we can confirm that this thing is the most terrifying thing that we know of. It's also something that we can't decipher. We can't even determine whether it's matter or energy." So, in the corner, a silent shadow suddenly leaned forward, revealing a blurry face. So we have to do our best to figure out its secret. This is a huge and magnificent project. It's not something that can be done by one or two people or one or two research institutions. We have to gather the strength of the entire civilization. Other than that, regarding the other boy, I think it's necessary to repair the portal as soon as possible and bring him back from that primitive, backward, and ignorant world. Repair the portal? That's not an easy thing to do. That magic ritual, so far, only a dozen or so spellcasters have mastered it. Order the remaining people to take action. In short, no matter what, we can't let anything happen to the other boy. I have a feeling that we'll be able to find some details from him that we've overlooked before. If that's the case, then send the order over. At the same time, I suggest that everyone use the resources at hand to study the dark blue liquid within the crystal. If it's really a weapon created by a higher civilization, we have to find a way to decipher it before the enemy arrives. Agreed. Seconded. Seconded.